Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1509 of the War News stream. And tonight we have more big news and a very big development happening today. We've seen that U.S. forces have begun to deploy a blockade on the Iranian Strait of Hormuz in a very big move that has left some people a little bit puzzled. We've also seen that Iran has threatened to destroy U.S. warships near the coast in a pretty strong threat. And also, the Yemeni Houthis are preparing to close the Red Sea Strait imminently, and it looks like it's coming right around the corner. So a lot of big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments from the Middle East, East Asia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the Balkans, Central Europe, and also the Caribbean as well over the course of the day. According to information that we've been able to ascertain just before we were able to go live on air, the United States of America's Central Command Area of Responsibility has stated that they will be deploying a significant amount of naval forces of the United States Navy near to the area of the Gulf of Oman to create a blockade in response to the ongoing Iranian blockade inside of the Strait of Hormuz. The plan, at least at the moment right now, is to completely stop any ships from passing through, including those from the Islamic Republic of Iran and other countries. We have also been able to hear additional statements as well, giving us some further information, as the Islamic Republic of Iran did openly threaten to destroy any U.S. warships that attempt to get near to the Strait of Hormuz or attempt to enforce a blockade, and the Islamic Republic of Iran has stated that blockading their blockade is going to be entirely unacceptable, as they are the only ones who get the blockade, and there is no counter-blockading to the blockade. We've also been able to see that there has been a rapid, sharp increase in the price of oil in Brent and WTI markets, as it appears that the markets are once again panicking, as it's become incredibly clear that no oil is going to be getting out of the Middle East anytime soon once again. We've also seen that in the midst of this, an Iranian tanker has been allowed to dock in India and unload its oil after an Indian purchase order was filled after the United States lifted our sanctions on Iranian oil tankers prior to be able to try and alleviate navigate the global oil markets. We're now believing that ship might be seized after it leaves port from India, although it was allowed to dock in India and offload its oil because the sanctions had been lifted on the Islamic Republic of Iran just weeks ago by the United States of America. Additionally, we've also been able to hear that inside of the People's Republic of China, the Chinese have been threatened with a 50% tariff if they try in any way, shape, or form provide support to the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the alleged manpad provisions that they're supposed to be providing at some point here within the near future. We've also heard that the Yemeni Houthis appear to be preparing a major blockade of the Bab El-Mendab, the major strait that passes here at the southern end of the Red Sea and also to the west of the Gulf of Aden, which accounts for around 12% of all shipping traffic around the world passing through it each day and every year. From what we understand, they attempted to board a vessel that was passing through the area today, and after the captain fired a flare at them, they apparently skittered off back into the open sea and departed from the vessel, but still showing us that the Houthis are preparing for some sort of militant actions and may have even been trying to take hostages as of today. The State of Israel also states that they are ready for a larger conflict with the Islamic Republic of Iran to resume, as they believe that a continued war is inevitable. And this also comes at the same time as the United States of America, according to officials privy to the developments within the White House, are stating that the U.S. is considering limited strike campaigns against the Islamic Republic of Iran once more. We've also been able to hear that the Vice President stated the exact demands that the United States made to the Islamic Republic of Iran that were completely rejected on all fronts. And we do understand that most every major war goal that we had entering the conflict was outright rejected by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and apparently the Iranians also asserted that the Strait of Hormuz is theirs to control and that they are not willing to relinquish it or even discuss a relinquishment of the Strait of Hormuz and the international waters that they currently are controlling through their blockade. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear of a shocking election upset for the 16-year-long tenured Victor Orban of Hungary, as Hungarian elections today proved that a significant number of the voters of the Republic of Hungary turned out in support of the opposition party and that of the now Prime Minister Magyar. Viktor Orban did concede a defeat today, and the opposition party has won such a large victory in Hungary that constitutionally they have what is called a supermajority, meaning that they do not have to form a coalition government with another political party, and they will be able to run the country as a singular party, and they have enough seats and enough votes within the parliament to really be able to pass whatever laws and resolutions they would wish inside of Hungary. Right over their airspace, significant U.S. air flights are still ongoing inside of the Middle East and out of the Middle East, which is also showing us that significant military operations appear to still be in the planning and drawing board at this moment against the Islamic Republic of Iran by the United States. Sweden has also been incredibly busy today, shadowing a Russian submarine that apparently was traveling somewhere near to the Strait of Denmark, and we also saw that they appear to have seized a vessel near to the port of Ystad today for some sort of pollution violations or some sort of violations of European pollution laws. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has also announced that they'll be uniting with the French Republic to create a coalition of navigation, or a coalition in support of the freedom of navigation, to put significant pressure on the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran to open the strait and to see that traffic continues to flow freely through the area instead of it being at a complete stop like it will be here incredibly soon. The United States has also conducted some strikes against alleged narco-terrorist vessels within the area of the Caribbean Sea over the course of the day, and this also comes at the same time as the Ukrainian armed forces have inflicted significant losses onto the Russian Federation on the battlefield today and have stopped any Russian advances once again, even in the midst of it being Easter Sunday inside of the state of Ukraine due to them operating the Easter holiday off the Eastern Orthodox calendar. So for many of y'all, Easter happened about last week. For the Ukrainians, Easter is happening today, or largely was happening yesterday relative to their time zone right now. But nevertheless, we are going to be making sure to get through all of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down to the smaller stories throughout the night. But before we do, I do have to announce, folks, that we are running a Sunday night fundraiser, and for none other than an absolutely incredible nonprofit, the USO, which helps with the morale and helps to keep the soldier spirits high of the Republic that are serving overseas at this moment right now, inside the Middle East and around the rest of the world to support American interests and to keep our sphere of influence and our alliance alive and ticking against our enemies. And so please do make sure to support that nonprofit, as it is an incredible one and does help to make sure that our soldiers over there lets them know that we aren't forgetting about them here on the home front. But with that, it is time for us to move on into all of the breaking news that we have over the course of this day, starting with our largest stories first and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. Moving us on into our first and largest stories of the day, we are of course going to be returning to the Middle East, as we do understand that there has been some significant developments today as far as U.S. military planning and strategy that pertains to the situation with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is currently closed still by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And if we check marine traffic at this moment right now, just to show you all this here really quickly, we can see that once again there is no international traffic that is transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. From what we can tell in the multiple different vessels that are currently passing through the area, we can see a Panamanian tanker and also a tanker flagged, I believe, out of the Marshall Islands, transiting somewhere near to Iranian waters. We can also see another Panamanian flagged bulk carrier heading apparently to Jebel Ali, which also is inside the United Arab Emirates, meaning that it's apparently departing the port. And we can also see a couple of other Iranian vessels and Panamanian ones that are currently transiting around the area of the island of Larak. But nevertheless, the international waterways are still completely closed at this moment, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has made it incredibly clear that they are going to be controlling the strait for an indefinite period of time. Earlier in the day, they released a statement saying that the situation is under control and that they still have absolute authority and control over the Strait of Hormuz, which at this moment we have not seen challenged by the United States, meaning that the blockade is still in full effect by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it is not allowing a single ship to either enter the Persian Gulf or exit the Persian Gulf unless if it's at the authority and at the allowance of the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime. We have also been able to hear that as a result of this, the United States of America has now started to make some pretty drastic strategic measures and actions over the course of the day. But before we get into those exact actions, I want to tell you all what kind of position the Iranians believe that they are in right now strategically, given what we have now heard that the United States demanded and the Iranians refused in the negotiations. A senior U.S. official spoke to Reuters and stated that Iran rejected demands to end uranium enrichment, to dismantle key nuclear facilities, to halt funding of regional proxies, and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Out of these claims that the U.S. official was able to speak to Reuters about, two of them are actually major war goals that we had going into this conflict, of which we had three: to end the Iranian nuclear program, to stop the funding of terrorist groups within the area, and not only that, the third and foremost is to stop ICBM missile development. We did not see that that one was touched on, at least in the statement that was given by a senior U.S. official, but we were able to see that the other two were touched on heavily. And the fourth, what we would call a de facto war goal of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, at this point was also not negotiated by the Iranians, and according to all of the statements that we have been able to get that have kind of beat around the bush on this idea, the Iranians have made it fairly clear that they believe that they have militarily been able to conquer and control the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore they're not even willing to negotiate whether that is a part of their territory or not, as they assume that because they conquered the waters of the Hormuz, it is now theirs to keep, and the United States can either take it from them or nothing else is going to change that from this point on. So it does appear that at the moment the Iranians are still playing hardball, which gives us an idea that at the moment right now, the Iranians do perceive their strategic situation to be one that is fairly advantageous to them and one that they might be able to see coming out on top of at least some point in the future. It is quite obvious and clear that within a direct military confrontation, the Islamic Republic of Iran is not able to properly fight or defend itself from U.S. attacks or U.S. forces in the air over the country. And the United States of America is able to control the skies of Iran, with largely air superiority being an assurity, but air supremacy being largely elusive. It does also give us an idea that even with that in mind, the Iranians believe that their control and blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be such a damaging action economically that it offsets any of their military disadvantages that has led them to get significantly damaged across the entirety of the country by U.S. airstrikes prior. For this reason, they're not budging on a single demand that they have, and they're not willing to compromise on a singular U.S. demand that we have made to them. So for this reason, they are going to largely be fighting a war of attrition from this point on, to where either we are going to tap out economically or they are going to tap out militarily from one form or another. We've now heard that as a result of this, the President of the United States has made a statement today, which I will read y'all here on air. So, there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis, but Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about but them. This is world extortion, and leaders of countries, especially the United States of America, will never be extorted. I have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. We will also begin destroying the mines the Iranians laid in the straits. That he just claimed 3 sentences ago didn't exist. Any Iranian who fires at us or at a peaceful vessel will be blown to hell. Iran knows better than anyone how to end the situation, which has already devastated their country. Their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft radar is useless. Khomeini, which is not the guy that we killed, by the way, the United States killed Khomeini with an A in the name, and most of their leaders are dead, all because of their nuclear ambition. The blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved with this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Additionally, and at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran, the President of the United States. Several hours
here's the problem though with the whole blockade situation. Here's the problem I'm seeing: the ships that are going to get the oil from Iran, those ships are not necessarily always Iranian. They're sometimes Chinese vessels, they're Indian vessels. I mean, there's all kinds of different countries' vessels that are going to Iran, specifically to Karg Island. They're loading up with Iranian oil and they're heading back to their home country with it. So, I mean, this is essentially not really a blockade just on Iran. It's really a blockade on those countries as well, since they're trying to get their oil out of the strait from Iran. So, like we were discussing the other night, how is the USA going to enforce such a blockade? Because to enforce it, you have to start seizing vessels. That's how you usually enforce a blockade. So, are we going to start seizing Chinese vessels, Indian vessels? I mean, what are they intending to do here?
I would have to say, I don't really even know, to be entirely honest with you. It doesn't really seem like this is a well thought out idea, to be entirely honest, and I really don't know how in the world this is supposed to bring about any sort of success. But nevertheless, I see some people saying, well, he didn't say that the mines didn't exist. I do want to point this out because I said that there in the minute of it because I just realized while I was reading it that that statement was made. Here's the two statements side by side, and this is in the same post. Iran has not allowed this to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere, out there somewhere, that nobody knows about but them. So that largely gives an idea or insinuates the idea that there really isn't any mines out there, and they're just making a statement and nobody knows where they are, and no one knows anything about them because they might not really exist. Then after that, we say that we're going to destroy the mines that the Iranians laid in the straits. You know, and generally you wouldn't say that nobody knows about but them if we know about them and we know that they're there and we're going to destroy them. So, you know, a bit of a contradictory claim within the same paragraph, given, you know, that the mines are there from what we understand, and that's why no one's really passing through the middle of the Strait of Hormuz. But nevertheless, a lot of people have also heard the CENTCOM announcement that came out hours later, given the following information. And actually, really quickly, let me make sure to go get that one further on up and into the strait. Actually, I believe it's down here. Here we are. This is the post right here. We were able to hear the following from CENTCOM as an official statement. Out of Tampa, Florida, which is where CENTCOM headquarters is. U.S. Central Command forces will begin implementing a blockade of all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports on April 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time in accordance with the President's proclamation, meaning that this blockade will be going into effect in their time in several hours. This blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas, including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM forces will not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. Additional information will be provided to commercial mariners through a formal notice prior to the start of the blockade. All mariners are advised to monitor notice to mariners broadcast and contact U.S. Naval forces on bridge-to-bridge Channel 16 when operating in the Gulf of Oman and the Strait of Hormuz approaches. That was the official statement by CENTCOM's area of responsibility, which lets us know that, at least at the moment, this is going to be targeting ships that have business to do with the Islamic Republic of Iran, which make up the only remaining traffic that passes through the strait. In general, very little to any ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz at all these days, even for the Iranians or anyone that has to do business with the Islamic Republic of Iran. On the day-to-day, we see, I believe it's something around 6 to 8 ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and all of those are either Iranian-flagged vessels or vessels that are aligned with Iran, so say from China or Russia, that then transit into the Persian Gulf to then do business with Iran and then leave. So this blockade is only going to be affecting about 6 to 8 vessels per day in reality, but these 6 to 8 vessels are a little bit special special than the rest that are affiliated with our sphere of influence. All of these vessels are either Iranian flagged, which there's no issue of trying to interdict those, but the other ones are either Russian flagged or they're Chinese flagged. And the issue with that is that dealing with ships at sea, especially within international waters, considering that our blockade is apparently going to be spanning the entrance to the Gulf of Oman, is going to be technically conducting acts of war if we ever try and enforce this blockade. And this is wherein the issue lies with this sort of a plan. The People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation's vessels that are flagged out of their countries are sovereign territory, at least according to maritime law, of those countries, if you want to call it territory, but they're sovereign holdings and assets of those countries, meaning that they're given about the same sort of legal status as the physical territory of those countries. So if the United States of America wants to enforce this blockade and a Chinese tanker comes up to the blockade line and the U.S. says, stop, you're not allowed to pass, we're blockading this area, and the Chinese have told that tanker, don't listen to that, just go straight through and see what happens, we have an option. Either we have to let that tanker through, because we don't want to start a larger confrontation with the Chinese, or we physically stop the tanker and then hop on board the ship and arrest the crew and then seize the vessel, which at that point is such an egregious violation, especially within international waters, that this could create a serious diplomatic incident with the People's Republic of China and possibly a larger fallout, even larger than that we've seen so far from the war in Iran, with the People's Republic of China, meaning that instead of controlling the situation and seeing that the Strait of Hormuz is eventually reopened, much to our benefit, we may actually see that we create detrimental actions to where the war actually expands in scope to include the People's Republic of China as a possible active belligerent, or to start causing even greater issues within East Asia on a completely separate front than the one we're in right now. Not only that, there's also the additional issue, folks, that this sort of a blockade is something that is a little bit counterintuitive to the objective that we have right now. The objective of the United States of America is to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and international shipping and freedom of navigation through those waters to try and stabilize the global oil market. Conducting a blockade on top of the Iranian blockade doesn't do anything to reverse that situation, and as a matter of fact, it only exacerbates the situation, because now countries like China, which might be deprived of the remaining oil that they're getting from the Middle East, will now have to start buying from other limited oil markets, possibly ours, which is already going to be strained quite significantly because of the high volume of purchase orders that are just coming in from the European Union and other countries within Europe right now. So generally, this might not be a great idea strategically, and I'll be entirely honest with y'all, folks. My belief in this thing being successful in any measure, strategically or economically, is incredibly low, as it does not achieve our objective of reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and it also leads to a high risk of expanding the conflict to include larger countries that we might generally want to avoid a conflict with at the moment right now, considering that our hands are tied inside of the Middle East, dealing with the Islamic Republic of Iran and their current blockade. But a lot of people currently aren't talking about this right now. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we actually briefly discussed this last night. The president made a post generally saying that the blockade was something they were considering. And then this morning, we heard that they actually ordered the blockade to be put into place. So it's a blockade on a blockade, which is an interesting concept. And now we're hearing that apparently the U.S. will seize any ships that are paying Iran's toll fee. So if anybody has the nerve to basically get extorted by Iran by paying the $2 million fee to go through the strait that was previously free to go through, then the U.S. is going to punish you extra hard by seizing your ship after that. So what are your thoughts? 43% said it seems like a solid idea. Let's give it a try. 28% said it's bad. This could lead to a possible war with China. And 22% said, I don't see how that will help. And I will say, tactically on its face, it doesn't sound like, shockingly enough, it's not a horrible idea on its face, but here's the problem, though. While it may actually hurt the Iranian oil economy because they can't sell any oil, it's going to put us at odds with China, because eventually we're going to have to come face to face with a Chinese vessel, and we're going to make the call, are we going to seize it, or are we going to let it run the blockade? But if we're planning on having the blockade be successful, we have to seize a Chinese vessel, and at that point, I have a feeling that Xi Jinping is going to have a few words to have with the United States, and that could lead to tensions that lead to a war between China and the United States, because seizing vessels is an act of war. That's been known to be an act of war for a long time, and if we do that, we are putting ourselves in a precarious spot, to say the least. So I'm going to say this. I see how it could help, but with the risk of escalation with China, I don't know if this is a great idea. If they want to do something similar, they could simply destroy Karg Island and take out the infrastructure. That would not necessarily put us in a direct conflict with China. It would sort of raise the tensions, but a war wouldn't be possible in my opinion. But seizing vessels of China, that seems like a rough idea. But Enforcer, what say you?
Historically, doing anything to vessels along the lines of seizing them is an incredibly tricky sort of a ground and a risk to play. And not only that could lead to significant repercussions. I see some people in the chat bringing up a point, which is a pretty good one, that this might be an attempt to try and stop the Chinese and allies of Iran from supplying Iran with weaponry. It doesn't actually stop most of anyone, and to be entirely honest with y'all, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as the old saying goes here. If the Chinese want to supply the Iranians, not through a port near to the area of the Gulf of Oman, what they could do is they could just transport the military equipment into Russia, then have the Russians transported by rail all the way down here to the area of the Caspian Sea, and then load it up onto a ship and then ship it into Iran, which the Russians would be more than happy to do, because that would be supporting the Iranians in a conflict against the United States, because the United States of America is an enemy of Russia, so that would be beneficial to them to help out the Chinese in that way. The Russian Federation has a direct sea access to the Islamic Republic of Iran, which we really can't do a lot about, because it goes through the Caspian Sea. And unless, like with China, we're willing to conduct some sort of hostile action against a Russian-flagged vessel and possibly create a war over that situation, there's not really a lot that we can do. That's also why, to put this out there as another great example, y'all have never seen the Russian Federation conduct an attack on any train or any truck that has been transporting military equipment to the state of Ukraine from NATO over 4 years in a place like Poland or in the open seas here in the Atlantic, because that would be an act of war either against us here in the United States of America or one of our allies within NATO inside of Europe. That's why they've never done that. That's also why we would not really want to conduct an action like this. That would generally be an act of war against one of those countries. And instead of seeing that this conflict resolves in a meaningful way that achieves some of our strategic goals and also reopens the Strait of Hormuz, instead, the Strait of Hormuz would still be closed, and now we might be seeing a larger conflict or confrontation with an even larger and more dangerous country like the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation, which, while the Russian Federation is fairly weak, it's still a lot stronger than the Iranians for that matter, and that would generally be a situation we want to avoid. So I would say that in my opinion, folks, here's something that I got to say, and I got to go back and read this post because I just got to make this a little bit clear. I want to use the president's words here to make my own argument, because a lot of what the president said actually is in line with what I've been saying. It's just that for some reason the approach that I've been talking about isn't the one that's being made. Let me go through here. Let's see. The United States Navy, the finest in the world, which it is going to be blockading, yada, yada, yada. And then beyond that, we're going to be clearing out the mines, apparently under fire, suggesting that we can do such a thing, and that's possible. And then apparently, if anyone fires at the minesweepers, we're going to blow them to hell, which makes it sound like we can just blast away really any threat along the coastline of the Strait of Hormuz. If that is the case, that the U.S. Navy is the finest in the world, that the Iranians have nothing left militarily, and basically everything's been destroyed, why in the world are we acting like we have to pit-pat around just physically taking control of the Strait of Hormuz? We can go and bombard, even by the president's words right now, all Iranian coastal anti-ship missile systems and drone systems, largely remove most threats, and then conduct convoy escorts through the Strait of Hormuz, which would be the most direct action that we could take, it would be the quickest action we could take, and it would probably assure the best results instead of the situation that we're looking at right now. Because let's take the approach that the president's working with right now, is that we're going to blockade all of the remaining ships, which are basically none that go through the Hormuz every day, and that's going to start putting pressure on everyone. That is a direct action that we're taking that has a significant amount of risk with a very low amount of reward, because there is no guarantee that the People's Republic of China is going to be able to put any kind of pressure on the Iranians that can count that would force the Iranians' hand to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So we're doing all of this direct military action that has a significant amount of risk. It could possibly lead to a larger conflict. We could possibly see major diplomatic schisms happen, major trade fallouts, such things and whatnot. So that way we can see that maybe the Chinese might be able to pressure the Iranians to open the strait, but that's not a guarantee, because Iran doesn't really rely a whole lot on direct Chinese economic and military support from what we can tell. So I'd have to be entirely frank with y'all, I don't really think this is a viable option in that regard, because sure, the Chinese might pressure them, but the Chinese might pressure them with saying, pretty please, can you open the Strait of Hormuz? And then the Iranians say no, and then we're back to square one where we are right now, where our real only option that will get us any real progress is to actually try and physically reopen the Strait of Hormuz through military force and then see where we go. And also on top of that, folks, what is the problem with that idea? Like, I've got to ask that for people who act like that's a bad idea. We haven't even tried that yet. Who's to say that that wouldn't work? What if everyone keeps acting like the Strait of Hormuz is this unfixable, untouchable monster, and then after a 2-week air operation there, we see that most of the threats have been cleared out to where we can actually conduct convoy duties through the strait to get the oil flowing again? Who's to say that that wouldn't happen? It easily could, and if that was the case, we would have been beating around the bush and conducting literal months of military activity to get nowhere, when we could have just done that and been over with this thing in about a week or a couple of months, really, or a couple of weeks for that matter, better yet. But I would say that should still be our approach, is to just try militarily reopening it. If it works, and then this whole thing's over. The Iranians have no leverage, they have no hand, we're on the winning side of this war from then on, and we can keep it going however long we want. If it doesn't work, well, then I was wrong, and then we'll have to go back to the drawing board and figure out if any of these creative ideas or solutions do anything. But we haven't tried the most direct and easiest option yet, and so why not try it? But anyways, outside of that,
just a random pause out of the blue.
I heard something in my headset. It went, and I was like, I think that might be you trying to say something. But outside of that, a lot of people are currently talking about what would happen if the Chinese start to conduct if the United States tries to conduct a boarding and a seizure of a Chinese ship near to the Strait of Hormuz, and what would the Chinese response possibly be? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so this is the hypothetical, big nuclear scenario right here, the big one. If this is to happen, what do you think is going to be the response? Because in order to enforce a blockade, like we mentioned earlier, you either have to start seizing these vessels that are trying to run the blockade, or you have to start firing and possibly destroying these vessels that are trying to run the blockade. So either one is an act of war. So if the U.S. has to intercept and seize a Chinese ship near the Strait of Hormuz to enforce the blockade that starts tomorrow, what will be the response from China? 43% said China will likely threaten naval escorts with these ships. 31% said China will send a strong letter, and 19% said China will threaten full-scale war. So, this is one escalation on top of another, because we're already hearing that the U.S. is threatening a 50% tariff on China if they send any more man-pad systems to Iran for air defense. We believe that China might have already sent some man-pads, and they're planning on sending some more as well based on recent reporting. So it's already escalated quite a bit. And now, if this whole situation with the blockade starts to happen and a Chinese ship is threatened by the United States Navy, that could be the feather that breaks the camel's back right here. That could be it. So I have a feeling that China will likely say they're going to start sending naval escorts with these ships, and that will probably be the moment that we have a showdown between the Chinese Navy and the U.S. Navy, and we'll have to see if the U.S. decides to start a full-scale war and probably spark World War III over the situation with blockading the strait. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that China is definitely at a minimum most likely going to threaten naval escorts. A strongly worded letter in this sort of an instance is not going to be happening. If we go to war with Iran, the strongly worded letter would be given. When we go to war with Venezuela, a strongly worded letter would be given, because it's not something that's directly dealing with a Chinese sovereign asset, vessel, or territory. This is dealing with a Chinese sovereign asset, territory, or vessel for the larger part, meaning that this is going to get a lot stronger of a response from the Chinese than anything else seen so far. And China will most likely state, and I have a feeling that this is probably what we hear out of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China has a right to be able to conduct actions however they wish and to conduct freedom of navigation activities throughout any international waterways, and for that reason, due to the American threat, they're going to be sending a vessel, a destroyer possibly, or several, to the area to be able to try and conduct some sort of escort or convoy duties through this area to make sure that their ships can continue to conduct their business within the area of the Persian Gulf. I have a feeling that that's probably what they're going to say, and once they say that and those ships are on the way, we now have an option. We can either fire upon Chinese warships and merchant ships that are trying to pass through our blockade, which then starts a war with China by default, or we back off and we let them through, meaning that the blockade is all but effectively collapsed to that point, because then the Chinese are able to get through, which is Iran's main customer, and they're able to do as they please, meaning that the blockade is all for naught, and we've achieved nothing, even for the minimal aims and goals that this sort of a convoy or a blockade would be conducting around the area. So I would say that this is probably not the greatest idea. There's real, like, I would be entirely honest with you folks, there's not a way that this is going to turn out well. I mean, we would have to see like a 2% chance that this sort of an idea from here and sticking with it would turn out well. There's so many ways that this thing can go sideways immediately and then expand into an even larger conflict. The escalations then grow, and then the situation becomes even worse and less easy to handle at this point. I just don't really see a lot of the current planning right now, taking in mind that we're trying to limit the scope and the growing scale and escalations of this conflict, because this sort of an action right here is making it pretty clear to me that we're going to be seeing probably some significant escalations here in the very near future, that it is going to make this war a lot more difficult, if not a lot larger and a lot more deadly than it was at the moment right now. So I hope that does address that at least the best I can, because I'm thinking at this point, folks, that it's pretty obvious and wildly clear that I don't think this is going to be working out all too well at all. Nevertheless, we also were able to hear that within the area of the Strait of Hormuz, there's been some interesting developments today. For one, 2 Pakistani tankers did get to pass through the strait today, from what we were able to hear, and apparently made it all the way to the other side. These are the only 2 tankers that we've seen today of any significant size, VLCCs that is, that have made it on and through towards the other side of the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. It actually appears that, according to Enforcer Matt right now, we have a message, apparently a post coming out from the President of the United States. Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so it's really nothing monumental, but I did want to show people this right here. It's a post that just came out on Truth Social a moment ago, and it's at the very top right here. I would typically not bother with something like this, but I just want to show people this because it's getting to the point where it's almost disturbing to a certain degree. It looks like he's posted a picture, what I appear to interpret as depicting himself as Jesus, and showing him apparently healing somebody in a sick, like a hospital bed or something, with people around him, and it looks like maybe heaven above him or something like that. A little bit odd, to say the least, I would say. I'm not really sure. I mean, to me, I'm a Christian personally. I will say I'm not, obviously nobody's perfect, but, you know, I'm a Christian. I consider this blasphemy to a large degree. And, you know, the Pope was just verbally attacked earlier, about a couple hours ago. So it seems like religion might be getting attacked tonight. It seems like quite interesting.
Huh. That's news. Yeah. Anyways, moving on from that, it's great to know that the president respects our good Christian faith so much that he blasphemed himself as the Lord Jesus Christ himself. Great to know that. Truly someone who has a respect for the religion that he claims that he stands for. I wouldn't ever make an image of myself standing in as Jesus Christ. That'd be ridiculous. But moving on from that, it is time for me to try and not make my blood boil by seeing that one, because I can already feel my ears burning in anger from that one. But moving on from that, we'll just pretend like that was totally fine, everyone. God forbid we get the political idiots angry in here tonight because some guy just blasphemed their entire religion. That's fine. But anyways, moving on from that, we have also been able to hear that inside of the Strait of Hormuz, there's been some other interesting developments over the course of the day. We have been able to hear that oil prices are shooting up once again, as it does appear that U.S. oil prices for WTI crude have risen about 10% at the open, rising above $105 a barrel as peace talks between the U.S. and Iran fail to reach a deal, which we were expecting. We have also been able to hear that the Hormuz is still largely completely empty at this moment, and it does seem, at least right now, that there will be generally no passages through the strait, as the Iranian blockade still appears to be incredibly firm, at least at this moment. We can see a couple of vessels here on the Iranian film that appear to be moored at anchor that are still awaiting transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
It is really empty, by the way. Also, I really haven't seen much activity hardly at all. Like right now, I'm not seeing hardly any activity that anybody's really mentioning of any like ships trying to go through the strait. It looks like it's still pretty much empty even right now.
Yeah, it does look like it's completely empty at the moment. And so it doesn't appear that we'll be seeing any change in that situation anytime soon with the current war plan that we have right now. We've also been able to hear that at the same time, the IRGC also stated that they will not be allowing the U.S. blockade, and they've also threatened to destroy U.S. warships that are within the area. Also, by the way, folks, we have a clip that came out today from the Iranians, which I will not be able to play on air due to us not really knowing about the copyright side of things with this one. But apparently it was an IRGC radio communication that they had with the USS Frank E. Peterson, the DDG-121, while passing through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday on the 11th of April of 2026. From what we understand, in the statements, they threatened to destroy the vessel, and it appeared that when the statements were made, it was somewhere around the area of the Gulf of Oman. So it appears that these radio broadcasts are not showing that the vessel had made it well into the Strait of Hormuz, and showed that apparently the threats were being issued, at least by that video, and the responses were being made by the destroyer somewhere near to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz on its eastern side near to the Gulf of Oman. So it does seem as though at the moment we can get a general understanding and an idea that the original confrontation and the threats that were given were issued around that area, and according to what we were able to hear from some U.S. officials who spoke on the matter, they stated that the destroyers had apparently turned around before the entrance of the Hormuz, and if we take that radio recording at face value, it would seem like the threats were levied around that time, and that probably would have been the time that they turned around. We did get to see, however, that there was transponder data that was given by marine traffic and other marine traffic or tracking sources that showed that the USS Frank E. Peterson had somehow made it just north of the UAE's coast on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, which we generally do not know how to account for, and we've also seen that CENTCOM has also made an additional statement as well, saying that the vessels did make it all the way through the Strait of Hormuz and back, but we're not really, I have to say, folks, I'm kind of, the jury's a little bit out on this one, because we just haven't really been able to see enough credible information from one side or the other to really confirm whether the vessel made it through or whether it didn't. And so we're still waiting for something that's a little bit more concrete, like, for example, a picture that was taken of the USS Frank E. Peterson while it was just north of the coast of the UAE, and then that would give us a really good idea that it actually made it through. Sadly, we just don't have any evidence of that whatsoever, so I'm still saying that the jury's out on that one. I don't know if they made it all the way through or not. But moving us on from that, we've also heard of major developments, not just within the Strait of Hormuz, but also within the area of the Bab El-Mendab. The Bab El-Mendab is a sister strait, for the larger part, on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, opposite to the Strait of Hormuz. This largely serves as the actual opening of the Suez Canal, as the Suez Canal is only a small, well, a fairly large canal, one of the largest in the world, that was dug from the Mediterranean to connect it to the Red Sea, and eventually its exit at the Bab El-Mendab back into the open sea to allow for international shipping to be conducted within that area. We do understand that at the moment right now there has been a significant incident that happened within this area today due to the UK MTO's warning reports. The UK MTO has received a report of an incident 54 nautical miles southwest of Al Hodeida in Yemen. A sailing vessel was approached by a skiff with approximately 10 to 12 people on board, four or five of whom were carried or armed with automatic weapons. The crew requested that the sailing vessel stopped, and when the master refused, they attempted to pull the skiff alongside the sailing vessel to board. The master deployed a flare, and the skiff turned away and departed to the southeast, once again returning back towards the Yemeni coastline. British authorities are investigating, and vessels are advised to transit with caution and report any suspicious activity to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Authority, or office more so. So it does appear that there was an incident today where it appears that the vessel was almost stopped and the crew was taken hostage, possibly for ransom, by the Yemeni Houthis to be able to try and conduct their actions to try and close the Bab El-Mendab. And outside of that, we do understand that a lot of people are talking about what's going to be happening in that regard. And Matthew, what are people saying about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Also, I hope you aren't trying to read the chat during all this.
No,
this
I'm
thing's
trying
going
to
like 200 chats a minute.
No, I'm trying to
get over stumbling.
No, I'm trying to get over my frustrations, honestly, about that whole tweet. Like, honestly, that's gotten me very pissed off, and I'm just trying to continue on. I'm not even reading the chat. I'm just trying to lock in at this point. But go ahead with the poll.
Honestly, that's understandable. I will say it's irritating to say the least. It's got me a little bit angry myself. That might be one of the actual first things that's actually kind of gotten under my skin to a very large degree, personally at least. But putting that aside, though, and focusing on the news here, getting back to our poll, we did see that a suspected Yemeni Houthi hijacking attempt occurred today near the Red Sea Strait. And do you believe that the Houthis will close the strait, and will that be happening very soon? 43% said no, the Houthis Houthis can't manage to close it on their own, while 38% said yes, it will be closed as well, along with the Strait of Hormuz, and 12% said I'm 50-50 on the issue. And I would say I think it might be closed as well. The Houthis do have the ability to, launch your really cheap rockets and stuff at vessels. And Iran is saying that they'll order the Houthis to close it if the U.S. tries to move in on the Strait of Hormuz, which we're expecting that to happen likely tomorrow when this blockade starts getting put into place officially. So I think it probably will be closed. But of course, there are possible ways to reopen that. It might be easier to reopen that situation than it is the Strait of Hormuz to a large degree. So I'm with the 39%. I think the Houthis are going to try to close it. They attempted to hijack a vessel today, but they were not successful in boarding the vessel from the looks of it. So it was unsuccessful. But of course, they do have missiles and aerial munitions and things like that, so that could pose a problem. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that in my honest opinion, I believe that they might be preparing to try a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. We did see that the Houthis have done that twice before in the past, one time in 2024 and another time in the early part of 2025. Generally almost the same incident happening one after the other. It was ended under the end of the Biden administration, then started it once again under the current administration, and then it was ended a second time around then. I would say that it's probably going to be closed here incredibly soon. The Iranians do have significant relations with the Yemeni Houthis as they are a proxy force of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we've also seen that they've leveraged them in the past to try and cause economic damage here in the West due to their actions around the Bab El-Mendab. If they were able to close it, we would see that transit times for intermodal shipping, particularly, which heavily uses the Suez Canal, would increase by about a factor of 3, and the fuel costs would also increase by a factor of 4 for transits that would have passed through the Strait of the Suez Canal and also through the Strait of the Bab El-Mendab. So we may be seeing that the Yemeni Houthis may be conducting a closure or a blockade of that strait here within the near future, as all it requires them to do is generally hit a couple of commercial ships within the area, and then we'll start to see that after that, most traffic will start to go around Africa, as they will not want to risk their vessels getting hit and having significant damage caused to them by an attack by the Yemeni Houthis. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, as I believe that it would be incredibly clear, at least to me, that the Iranians would like to leverage that sort of an advantage, and the Houthis may be more than willing to leverage that sort of advantage, as it may give them a significant amount of support by the Iranians once the conflict ends, if it ends in Iran's favor, which I would hope that it wouldn't. But nevertheless, we have also been able to get some other news out of the area as well. While the United States of America is announcing a blockade of the of the Iranian blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and is going to be stopping any Iranian ships from going out at sea and doing business, we were able to see a satellite picture today of a Iranian vessel. This is the VLCC supertanker named Felicity, which is owned by the National Iranian Tanker Company, and has brought in 2 million barrels of Iranian crude oil to India, which has never been allowed for decades, mind you all, following a sanctions waiver that was issued by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control. The importer is Reliance Industries, and their refineries are based in Sikka. Another few million barrels are expected to arrive over the coming week if things do not change. So to give you all a little bit of an idea here of the kind of foreign policy whiplash that we've been having at the moment, we understand that the U.S. is blockading the Strait of Hormuz and also the Iranian blockade to stop any Iranian ships from getting out. And at this point, from satellite photography that we're seeing, it appears that allegedly, an Iranian supertanker is making its way into India after sanctions waivers were issued by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control. Whether or not we can end up confirming that this is the vessel in question, and it is an Iranian-flagged one, we can confirm that the U.S. did give a waiver to Iranian oil tankers and Iranian oil ships to go and sell their oil out in the open world about the second week into the war, because they were scared that the oil prices were going to start getting out of control, so they wanted to stabilize them. Now our approach is that we're just going to take everyone down with us at this point economically, and if the oil can't get out of the Middle East for us, it's not getting out for anyone at all. But just a couple of weeks ago, it was a completely different approach. But outside of that, it does appear that that is a situation that we're hearing developing right now near to the Indian coast, and we've also been able to hear that the Saudi Arabians have been able to get their, I believe it's called the East-West oil pipeline back up and running at 7 million barrels a day, but I also have to give you a little bit of a caveat here. Only 5 million barrels of oil per day is transited to ships waiting in the Red Sea to then be shipped out into the greater world. So it's not 7 million barrels of oil that's heading into the open world to be sold, it's only about 5 in reality. We've also been able to hear that the Israelis are believing believing right now that war is most likely going to be returning here soon, as reports did come out earlier today that there is a heightened alert in Israel over the possibility that Iran could derail negotiations with a large-scale attack on Israeli territory. So it does seem that at the moment, there is some pretty interesting sorts of developments, to say the least, that the Israelis are watching that make them believe that they're about to be attacked soon. I'm sure the Israelis will make sure to preempt that by attacking Iran before they can attack back, if we know how the Middle East goes these days. Also, we were able to hear that the Iranians have also stated today that they're, at least according to Iranian state television, which I do have to make that clear, they have stated that the process of reconstructing destroyed and damaged oil infrastructure is already underway, with a plan to reach 80% capacity in the next 2 months. Per Iran CEO of the National Iranian Oil Refining and Distribution Company, Mohammad Sadek Azimafar, contractors have been mobilized and restoration work is already in progress. We also got one last thing out of the Iranian capital today, but we already covered that one prior. So, with that in mind, that is largely all the developments that have directly happened within the Middle East today. And I gotta say, folks, that is one hell of a day right there. One hell of a day, I gotta tell y'all. And we're about to be moving on into some of the developments that have happened in the periphery, like, for example, the threatening of tariffs on China over their alleged arms support to the Islamic Republic of Iran, but that's more so in the periphery and outside of the region, so we'll be lopping that in with basically everything that happened in East Asia today, and moving on into the rest of the news that we have from around the world. But before we do, I do have to say a humongous and tremendous thanks to everyone so far who has been supporting the fundraiser for the USO. Right now, we are at a whopping $935 raised out of the $2,500 goal. And I gotta say, folks, it's absolutely amazing to see that people are helping out this fundraiser for the USO, as it's helping our troops and soldiers of the Republic overseas and keeping up their morale and keeping their spirits high as they continue to conduct their actions and duties in support of the United States and the Western Sphere. So I hope that we are able to see that this fundraiser reaches the fundraiser goal, because the Leaf Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal in the entirety of its history. But before we move on and into the rest of our news, I do want to make sure to give a shout out to all of the top donors who have supported the fundraiser so far. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so right now we are just shy of about $1,000 raised, which is fantastic work, by the way. And also, to call off our top donors so far, we have a $100 donation from Zeke Rose, also known as Hal, if I'm not mistaken here with that. But a huge shout out to Zeke for that $100 donation to the fundraiser. We also had a 50 from Ella MC Wills Nafo, as well as a 50 from Dax Salmon, Catherine Mosley, Sadata Hosoda, and Old Warrior Fella. And also, by the way, I do want to apologize up front. If I happen to miss your top donation above $50, please let me know in the live chat, and I will shout your name off before we get to our last question segment, and let us know about that in the chat, that is. But right now, though, we just crossed over the $1,000 mark right now, and also really good charity, by the way, helping out the U.S. soldiers, I must say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, a humongous shout out to each and every single person who has supported this fundraiser so far tonight, because it is now getting incredibly close. It's actually surpassed $1,000 raised, and it's now at $1,100. And I gotta say, it's absolutely an incredible and amazing thing to see that so many people have continued to support this fundraiser, because if it wasn't for all of y'all amazing folks, we wouldn't be able to make these fundraisers possible each and every single Sunday to be able to help out and all of the types of news that we cover around the world. The USO is an absolutely amazing nonprofit and has helped out a large amount of U.S. soldiers in keeping their morale high and keeping their fighting spirits up overseas. And we love to know that many people are supporting this fundraiser tonight to try and make sure that the soldiers of the Republic that are over there, and let them know that we are still thinking about them and rooting for them over here. And so a humongous thanks to everyone so much once again who has supported this fundraiser so far. And I hope that we get to see that this fundraiser reaches $2,500 tonight. I'm pretty sure that it will. It's only a matter of time, because the Leaf Spring Army has quite literally never missed a singular fundraising goal. As Samuel Sizamanski threw in 100 right there. Look at that. Holy moly. That's something. And Gabruzel, the Great, also threw in a 50 as well. Truly incredible stuff right there, I gotta say. And I gotta say, it's a wonderful and amazing thing to see so many people supporting this fundraiser, because now it's all the way up to 1.3 thousand, and it's getting over halfway there. Oh, we're halfway there. But anyways, outside of that, it is time for us to move on into a couple of questions here. We're going to be getting 3 of them from the chat, so we can thank all of y'all for watching and thank you for your time so far, because I forgot to mention, by the way, folks, that over the course of this hour, 26,000 people have been on the stream at the peak, and 130,000 people have watched this stream up until this point right now. And I got to say, humongous thanks to every single person who's been watching so far, because we like to know that many of y'all consider this channel to be y'all's primary source of news. And not only that, y'all are pretty much showing up here every single night regularly. So, Matthew, what do we got for our first question from the chat tonight?
All right. And also, by the way, we do have a few super chats, by the way, that have come in anyway on the Sunday night. We will address those at the last question segment, so we have time to rabbit hole on them and also to address them in their entirety to go into all the different rabbit holes we can possibly go into. So in the meantime, though, we will grab 3 live chat questions. And also, by the way, just a reminder, on Sundays, we really don't do the super chats. If you want to throw one in, we can't stop you. And obviously, we are appreciative. But we generally just grab a whole bunch of live chats and we run through as many of those as we can on Sunday nights when we run fundraisers. So if you have a question for us, you don't have to throw in the super chat unless you just want to. You can just tag at It's Enforcer Matt in the live chat and put your question behind it, and I'll add it to a spreadsheet, and hopefully we'll get to a whole bunch of them during the last segment. But our first one here is going to go to Logan. He said, any more news on the 3rd carrier strike group that's supposed to arrive in the Middle East?
From what we understand, the USS George H.W. Bush is still underway at the moment and has not made it into the area. Currently, we understand that the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford are still deployed in the area, but we have not been able to hear of the arrival of the George H.W. Bush yet at this moment. And we've also not been able to hear of the arrival of the 11th MEU on board the USS Boxer, which is also still underway at this moment, somewhere within the Pacific, and is expected to arrive within the Middle East here probably within the coming week. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know right now, because we haven't been able to hear of the arrival of both that carrier strike group and that other amphibious ready group yet. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, our second live chat question is going to go to AF Kaplan. He said, if the U.S. does seize a ship from China, do you think China will respond by invading Taiwan rather than attacking the U.S. directly?
I don't think that they'll be invading Taiwan, but there is a decent amount of actions that they can conduct that could cause us a decent amount of damage. For example, they could start to escalate the situation with Japan and Taiwan and possibly even try and goad the North Koreans into conducting military actions against South Korea to try and see if they can fuel a proxy war or create some sort of a confrontation that ties up our forces in Indo-PACOM's area of responsibility or makes us start looking a little bit more over there. They could also try and conduct reciprocal actions as well, which is something that a lot of people don't think about, that if the United States tries to stop and seize a Chinese vessel, the Chinese could just announce, we're going to do the same thing to any American flagged or any American affiliated vessel in East Asia, and they could just try and seize any vessel like that of its type that's within the waters near to China. We could also see that they could try and conduct significant reciprocal actions as well in a myriad of other ways, but that's generally what I would be believing at the moment, because the invasion of Taiwan is largely in its own timetable at this point, as far as how materially ready the Chinese will be for that sort of an invasion, and that will still be taking a little bit time longer, probably somewhere around late 2027, in my honest opinion, and I think that that's largely a timetable that isn't going to be budging anytime soon, because they're still trying to get their ships and then special support equipment built to be able to try and make those sorts of operations possible, and they just don't have that yet. Also, a humongous shout out to Chris Fieldbach, who just threw in a 250. Hey, and I gotta say, absolutely crazy. And we also were able to see that a whole bunch of other people have continued to support this fundraiser, including Yosidamon, who threw in a 50. Really amazing and incredible stuff. I gotta say, a huge shout out to everyone who has been supporting the fundraiser, because now we're $1,800 raised for USO and only about $700 away from the fundraiser goal. And I hope that we'll be able to see that we reach this goal here incredibly soon. But with that in mind, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news from around the world. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so the third and final one of the first segment goes to Dan Brooks. He said, what happens if a ship just, hits a random floating mine? What happens then?
The vessel would get ruptured, it would sink, and that would generally be that. What do you think that Matthew, that question is trying to ask beyond like the literal sense of the mine hitting a ship? What is it trying to ask, like the larger diplomatic repercussions or something?
Yeah, I think he's asking like what would be the like strategic implications of that, I think, or like the geopolitical implications. It depends on whose mine they hit, and I'm sure whichever ship got hit, there would probably be some type of investigation into whose mine it was. If it turned out to be the Iranians' mine, it really won't change much because if let's say a Chinese vessel hits an Iranian mine, China is largely friendly with Iran, and it will just be chalked up to just an unfortunate accident, pretty much. If a U.S. vessel hits one, I mean, we're already at war, so there's not much that can get any worse with that. But if a Chinese vessel hits a U.S. mine, like let's say in some weird scenario, the U.S. starts trying to mine the exit of the Gulf of Oman or something like that, and then a Chinese vessel hits a U.S. mine, that would be a lot different. That's pretty much the only scenario involving mines that would actually lead to anything consequential, at least in my opinion.
And I would definitely agree with that assessment for the larger part. And so I hope that does address that the best I can. Well, at least the best Matthew can, really, considering that he was the one who gave the more in-depth answer there. But I hope that does address that the best we possibly can. Of course, we always try our best, folks, even in the middle of me just absolutely being livid over here. So with that, it is time for us, folks, to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night, as we have been able to hear more significant developments from around the entirety of the world. The President of the United States has threatened a 50% tariff on the People's Republic of China if they help Iran militarily today, stating that there's going to be a problem if they try and help out. We don't really know what the Chinese Foreign Ministry's response officially to this is going to be, but we have a feeling that the Chinese are probably going to take this as a challenge, and they're not going to be backing off. As recently we started to see that the Chinese aren't really in the attitude or really the care at this point to really want to back off. As a matter of fact, we've seen that most times the U.S. has tried to confront them recently, either in trade wars and other developments. They generally have started to become confrontational, which is showing that they're believing that their position is confident enough to where they can start to become confrontational and possibly stand to gain something from it. We've also been able to hear outside of that the U.S. Southcom's Area Responsibility reported that there was a strike on another alleged narco vessel earlier today, as we were able to see in this clip right here. It appears that the middle part of the vessel is blurred out, and we see several people on board this vessel, and then we can see it getting hit by the U.S. munition and being destroyed.
And where was this again?
Somewhere within the Caribbean.
Jeez, man, that's crazy. They're still hitting stuff off the Caribbean like that. That's wild. They had stopped doing that for a long time. I guess they're just back to it again, just sort of randomly.
Yeah, it's like, I thought we claimed that all of these were destroyed like 4 months ago, but I guess not, because we're still blowing them up. So that is the case at the moment right now. But moving us on out of the Caribbean, and on over and into the area of Europe, we actually have a significant amount of news that's come out of Europe today, and also one that kind of pertains to Britain and Canada simultaneously as far as important or major statements that have been made between the two over the course of the day. But before we get to that, I do want to show you all a little bit of news out of the far east of Russia in Komsomolsk on Amur. We were able to see that a walkout was conducted within the area after Chinese workers had allegedly not been paid. If it loads. It's not loading, and I really don't have the patience for that tonight. But they walked out, and it appears that they're not getting paid, and it appears that there's still industrial woes and economic woes that are continuing to grip the Russian Federation. We've also been able to additionally hear that the head of the Canadian Armed Forces has stated today that generally they are seeing that the situation is changing for them strategically and that things might start to coalesce in a fairly different way here in the future for the nation of Canada and its general position strategically with the United States of America and the larger part of the NATO alliance. We've also been able to hear that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, along with the French Republic, has stated that they're going to be working with other partners to create a coalition to protect freedom of navigation. And this is also one of those unintended side effects, folks, that people don't really think about when they hear about the U.S. conducting a blockade, is that this is generally stopping anyone at this point from getting through at all. Britain and France weren't able to get through already, and now we're understanding that literally nobody can get through the strait because now the U.S. is blockading on top of the Iranian blockade. So right now, that is apparently a situation that is ongoing at this point as well. We also were able to hear that the UK announced today that it will not be taking a part in the US-led blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and they have stated that we continue to support freedom of navigation and the opening of the strait, which is urgently needed to support the global economy. And that was according to a government spokesperson who talked to Sky News. And generally, anyone who knows much of anything about the Strait of Hormuz would understand that a blockade is not that great of a thing to see continuing. And to show you something a little bit interesting, interesting here. As Zeke Rose just threw in a $333 donation, getting us over the fundraiser goal. We hit the goal. Hey!
Look at that.
Ding, ding, ding,
Smash.
ding.
The goal.
Holy
The goal
moly.
has been smashed. Look at that right there. I tell you what, that goal has been smashed. I tell you, that's fantastic work right there, I must say. Or, honestly, that was actually pretty quick. I was a little bit worried there at the beginning, but that was actually almost just an hour actually to hit the goal. So very impressive.
Man, they had us in the first half, not going to lie. But yeah, that really impressive to see that people have been supporting this fundraiser incredibly tonight, because the USO is an absolutely amazing nonprofit to support, as it helps out U.S. soldiers over there, and it helps them to be able to serve this republic properly, so that way we can defend our sphere of influence in the United States of America directly, which is a wonderful and incredible thing. Truly an amazing and great thing. And so a humongous thanks to everyone who has supported the fundraiser tonight once again. And with that in mind, it's time for me to get you all into a little bit of analysis here about this whole freedom of navigation thing. Because, a lot of people have been saying, folks, and I find sometimes I find these criticisms to be quite well, that we haven't shown any verifiable information and statistics to show that the situation would have an impact on the United States of America. And folks, I had to do some digging today before this show, and I had to do a little bit of additional research on top of the usual and continuous research that we do, and reading and learning that we do behind the scenes to be able to try and run this show. And I found today, folks, something that's incredibly interesting, to me at least. This comes from none other than the U.S. Energy Information Administration, which was able to tell us something a little bit interesting. Take a look at this, folks. Look at that spreadsheet. Oh, buddy, y'all know we're about to be getting a little bit down into the details, but I'm going to save y'all of all of the tables, because I was going through and reading some of these tables. Some of them are not that important. This is generally just a summation of the decades, but generally, the one thing I want to show y'all here, which is incredibly important, is U.S. oil production and U.S. oil consumption, because this is something that has been compiled here very masterfully in this PDF that we're using here on air, that tells us an interesting story, and one that I think is very important to tell for all of y'all. This right here, in the red line, is total field production. That is the field production of all types of fuel that we produce here in the United States, or some sort of liquid fossil fuel in the larger part. So that includes natural gas liquids and crude oil. Now look at this, folks. Right here, this graph, the red line, says that we produce about 20 million barrels of liquid fossil fuels a day. Now that's very interesting, folks. And y'all know something? Well, I'm about to show you this on another graph that's on page 20 of this PDF. But y'all know what's interesting about this, folks, is that is the exact, literally par for par production that we consume in this country every day. But here's the problem with that, folks, is that that's not crude oil. That includes natural gas liquids and crude oil. So this includes all of that, and we don't. And one of the big things that we actually export here in the United States of America is liquefied natural gas. We're actually one of the largest producers in the world of liquefied natural gas, and so we are a significant exporter of it. We also export crude as well, but our crude consumption far out exceeds our crude production. The United States produces, as of last year, about 12 million, more so 13 million barrels of oil per day. Now let's go down to page 20 and skip all of the additional details that they tell us here, and also surmise in this PDF. And let's go all the way down to here to page 20. And this shows us something very interesting. This breaks down petroleum consumption by sector. And this is just crude oil and refined fuel products, so petroleum products. And let's take a look at it and let's see how in the world the U.S. is stacking up when we consider how much we produce in crude oil, which is about 13 million barrels of oil a day, versus our consumption. And if you look at it, you can already tell that things are not going to be looking that good. The industrial side of the United States of America uses about 5.6 million barrels of oil a day to run their industrial sector. Transportation alone in this country eats up literally every barrel of oil that we produce, meaning that every bit of consumption above transportation in any other facet, residential, commercial, industrial, or electric power, generally is having to either be imported from somewhere, or we're having to find the oil or the refined fuel and just buy it and have it sent over here. We actually do not produce enough crude oil in this country to be energy self-sufficient. Unlike what people claim. We actually come up every single day in the United States of America with around a 7 million barrel deficit in fuel products, meaning that we produce 7 million barrels less of oil per day than we're consuming. And that means that we actually have to import fuel from overseas. And one of our largest fuel import partners is Canada, the second is Mexico, and then OPEC makes up about I believe it's something like the remaining 15%. And I went and looked today, folks, and did a little bit of research on this, and that 15% missing gap from OPEC could lead to the $150 per barrel oil price that a lot of people have been warning about here in the United States. Because the thing about it, folks, is that price fluctuations actually do not directly reflect the lost number of a good due to the demand. If the demand's at 100% and the material supply is at 100% or greater, then the price will either be lower than the product's worth because it's an oversaturated market, or it'll be directly on par with what the price should generally be, given all of the cost and factors and the small profit margin. However, if the supply falls anywhere below 100% demand, prices can start to rapidly skyrocket. And let me put it this way, folks. There's 100 people in this stream right now, let's say hypothetically, and I have 100 meals today for y'all to buy, and y'all eat one meal a day somehow, some way. You know, it's that little piece of broccoli and boiled chicken. So y'all have to buy that meal, and there's 100 of them today, and they only cost $5. So all of y'all get a meal, y'all can all afford it, and it's all fine. Tomorrow, though, I only have 80 meals, and there's still 100 of y'all left. So that means that today, at the end of the day, 20 of y'all are not going to be eating. 20 of y'all are going to be starving. There's just not enough meals to go around. So then the price is fixated at that point based on who in the world doesn't want to be hungry. And the price could go as high as it could. Hungry. No one wants to be hungry, obviously, man. Nobody wants to be hungry. And Matthew, what would you do in that hypothetical scenario to not be hungry? Would you pay any amount to get one of those 80 meals? Or would you just, have a fixed price and then say I'll starve after that?
I mean, me personally, I'm not a criminal, so I mean, I wouldn't start robbing people or anything like that. But at the same time, though, I would need some food because I have somewhat of a high metabolism, so I kind of need to eat. Maybe like just one Costco chicken a day, possibly. That might work. I can come up with $5, I think.
But the thing is, though, is that there's going to be 20 people who are starving to death at the end of the day, treating this hypothetical seriously to tell people how this kind of works here. There's 20 people who are going to be starving at the end of the day. Are you going to pay whatever it takes to get one of those meals, or are you going to be one of the people who's starving?
Oh, I'll pay whatever I got to pay at that point. I'll find the dough.
So at that point, you're basically like in a bidding war, right, against all other 100 people for one of those 80 meals. And then at that point, what would be your limit? Let's say you have like $20. What would be your limit, price wise, to how much you'd be willing to pay to be one of those 80 people to get the meal?
Well, that's basically supply and demand. You pay whatever you have to pay at that point. Whatever your salary or your income allows you to spend, you'll spend whatever you have to if you have the means to get it. So basically supply and demand. Supply is low and demand is high. The price is going to skyrocket.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to get at, folks, right here by talking about this, is that the price will start to skyrocket insurmountably. It will be to a level that no one's ever seen. As a matter of fact, it'll be worse than what we saw back in the 70s during the oil crisis when we physically ran out of fuel. It's going to be pretty bad because all of y'all have to get around every day. And here's the breakdown, folks. The industrial side of things is not going to be deprived of fuel. Industry is considered a vital economic interest. So if anything, they will be prioritized for the government for fuel. So if we are working off of our domestic stores alone and they're not being tapped into by other foreign countries, which we'll also get into here in a minute, that means that y'all are going to be fighting for whatever's left after the industrial and the commercial and residential side gets their share. And that means there's not going to be enough to go around for y'all, and y'all are going to have to be paying incredibly high prices, or y'all are going to be plumb out of luck and just not be able to afford it. That's how it's going to work. Here's the other problem as well. We produce 13.5 million barrels of crude a day, which I just told y'all, folks, doesn't even cover our domestic oil consumption here in this country. The Europeans right now have a conga line of ships, several dozen long, that are sailing all the way around Africa and to the States to start loading up millions of barrels of oil per ship each and bring that to Europe because they have no oil at all right now. And they are entirely reliant, because there are no oil fields for the most part in Europe, on oil imports to try and keep anything in Europe running. So now we're going to be seeing that not only do we not have enough oil to keep things running, and the price is going to be skyrocketing here, now the Europeans are going to be coming over and poking a straw in our oil market and sucking oil out in the millions of barrels every day, which is, a significant fraction of our oil production daily, and shipping that over to Europe just to try and keep a minimum of economic activity going. And now y'all can see the problem. Like, I think if y'all hadn't seen it yet, these facts and statistics here generally would give y'all the problem. We have to open the Strait of Hormuz because if the Europeans start tapping into our oil consumption, we are absolutely screwed. They are screwed either way, very badly or badly. We are going to be screwed as well, very badly or badly. So right now we need to try and get the Europeans back on that Middle Eastern oil, because them buying our oil doesn't do any of us any good at all at any level. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. I saved that PDF for that moment right here on stream, folks. And that's why right now Britain and France are trying to create that little coalition in the support of freedom of navigation, because they're understanding, unlike certain people in the U.S. government who apparently think that the return of Christ, that this situation isn't really going to be turning out all too well for anybody if this continues the way it is, and if we just start doubling down on top of the Iranian blockade. Outside of that, though, there's been a very eventful day in Europe. And to move y'all to probably some of the biggest news, we were able to hear that today, inside of Hungary, there has been a little upset. A little one. The voter turnout was wildly high, and it appears that it reached an unprecedented level of 74.23%. That is the highest voter turnout ever recorded in post-communist Hungary. And it was a very interesting day. But before we get into the details here and give you all the big news, I do want to make sure that a lot of people are talking, or at least what we're hearing about people thinking about that development of the coalition between France and Britain for the freedom of navigation. And also the fact that Canada and Britain are also warning that there may be a larger scale change of a conflict and their role within that conflict here within the near future. And Matthew, what are people talking about that, and what are you saying about it as well?
Okay, so before we get into our Hungary news there for a second, let's jump back to the story we had a moment ago. We are hearing that Canada, top Canadian officials came out today and they joined Britain in warning the NATO alliance to prepare for a large-scale conflict, as they call it. So why are all these different countries saying this? Because there's got to be something to it, because now we're seeing Canada, Britain, and also the usual suspects saying this large-scale conflict is right over the horizon. So what is coming soon? 53% said they expect World War III. While 31% said they expect raised tensions, and 11% said it's probably just rhetoric. And I think the main reason they're doing this, by the way, is number one, World War III is on the horizon, but nobody really knows when that's going to pop off, like with Russia, China, and the superpowers fighting each other. Nobody's really sure when that's going to pop off, but it's somewhere on the horizon, so they're playing it safe. But I think the real reason they're saying this is because they're really not certain if the United States is going to be there if something breaks out. So Canada and Britain, etc., they're trying to plan as if they're on their own. That's why they're panicking, because they're not sure if the U.S. is going to be there, if they have to declare Article 5, because the U.S. doesn't know where its loyalties lie at this point, basically. So they're doing that for that reason. But they still have France, though. I mean, France is going to be the de facto NATO leader, basically, while the U.S. figures out what's going on. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I believe they're all expecting World War III, and that's a pretty clear certainty at this point, that either a war is going to start with Russia, or the war in the Middle East is going to start spreading to where it might involve everyone, considering how badly it's being planned and executed at this point at the highest level here in the United States. So I think they're getting the idea that no matter what, war is a guarantee somewhere within the world somewhere, and they need to start getting ready for that. And so with that, moving us on out of that poll and back down into the Republic of Hungary, it's now time for us to get on into the big news today, folks. That voter turnout was high, real high. 74.3% of the voting population of Hungary turned out in this election today. And a lot of people were thinking, Oh, there's going to be a reckoning coming around, So a lot of people had heard, and of course, folks, I'm not a Hungarian, so I'm kind of giving you all the outsider perspective on this, a third party perspective. But a lot of people had heard that Viktor Orban wasn't really Hungary's guy anymore. He had been in charge of the country for about 16 years, clearly aligned with the Russian Federation, and was openly, generally supporting the Russian Federation in a myriad of ways in foreign policy and everything else. And a lot of people really weren't happy with that. But there was a saving grace that they got, folks. The current administration here in the United States sent the vice president to go over there and campaign for him, really, really help him out, let the people know that that's the guy that they ought to be behind and backing, because nothing says pro-American and pro-Western like supporting a guy who clearly looks like he's aligned with the Russian Federation in every way. So the election results came in today, and I got to tell y'all, folks, the vice president is a force of nature because he met Pope Francis a few days later. The guy died. He went and campaigned for Viktor Orban, and his whole political campaign died a few days later. A supermajority was achieved in Hungary by the TISA party, which is the party of Magyar, and they have completely uprooted the Fidesz party, which was Viktor Orban's party, from power. And not only that, they have achieved a congressional supermajority in the Hungarian parliament, which is pretty unbelievable, and I'll tell you all why. The TISA party, actually doesn't really have much to do with the TISA party, but it has to do with the Hungarian constitution. The Hungarian constitution requires that a party has in excess of 133 seats to be able to control the country as a singular party. If you do not have 133 seats, you have to do what's called forming a coalition, which is where you have to go and find another political party within the parliament and unify with them and say that the two of us are going to be working together to form a majority government under the parliamentary system to be a legitimate government. And from what we understand, the TISA party blew out the voter turnout and the votes so heavily that they achieved a congressional supermajority in Hungary, which is very much unheard of inside of the Republic of Hungary since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Warsaw Pact, and the fall of the Soviet Union way back in 1991. And it doesn't appear that a lot of Hungarians were really a big fan of the foreign policies of Viktor Orban, and we were even able to see this video right here in the subways of Budapest of many people chanting after Viktor Orban had conceded defeat today and had stated that he had lost the election fair and square. Many people were chanting in the subways, the Russians need to go home. And so a very interesting sort of a thing to see nonetheless, and it does appear that a lot of people are talking about what the future is going to be bringing for the Republic of Hungary, the European Union, and Ukraine at large. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about this as well?
Okay, so Viktor Orban, he lost badly today, very, very badly. The turnout was record high inside of Hungary, so people in Hungary were apparently fed up from the looks of it, very much fed up. So the big question is this, though, in relation to geopolitics, will Ukraine finally get the 90 billion euro loan that the EU was going to give to Ukraine, but was generally vetoed by Orban's government? Is Ukraine finally going to get it? It looks like 62% said yes, Ukraine will be funded now that Orban is out. 16% said no, it will likely still be paused, and 11% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And I suspect, also, by the way, I did a little bit of research, but not a whole bunch because it's really not pertinent to our coverage to a large degree. The fellow that was elected, he's not like, the polar opposite of Orban, just to make that perfectly clear. But he's not anything like Orban when it comes to how extreme Orban was when it comes to leaning Russian versus, supporting Ukraine. So don't expect anything, groundbreaking. But I think ultimately, though, I think that $90 billion loan will be allowed to go through. And I think Hungary will lift its veto on the EU Council that's preventing that loan from going through, which is a very, very positive piece of news for Ukraine because they desperately need that, by the way. And like the enforcer mentioned, we even saw the U.S. vice president being sent over to Hungary, a foreign country, with a completely foreign politician in a country that's not America, obviously, and they were campaigning for him, even though the guy was leaning Russian. Seems a bit crazy. That actually backfired, it looks like. It looks like Orban lost terribly. It was almost embarrassing how bad he lost. So I'm with the 62%. I think they will be funded inside of Ukraine. But enforcer, what say you?
Man, I guess you could say that they were hungry for change, huh?
They were so hungry. I'm telling you, they were hungry. I'm telling you.
I got to tell y'all, folks, they were hungry for change up in Hungary today, and they got it. So, from what we understand, Magyar is a little bit different. He is pro-European Union. That's one thing that Viktor Orban certainly wasn't. He acted like the European Union was a blight, which is kind of funny because if you look at Hungary and the European Union, they're almost like the equivalent of a welfare state. Like they leech off of the European Union's common funds, and they really don't contribute much. It's a little interesting that you would hate the European Union was basically the hand that's financially feeding it, but to each their own. But Magyar actually is a humongous supporter of the European Union and also generally of the European Union's position in Europe and its support of the war in Ukraine. So that is a pretty big change. Of course, on the domestic politics side, we never get into that. It's really the foreign policy side that counts for us. But this is a significant win, at least for pro-Western interest, as we'll be able to see that this will most likely no longer be held up within the European Union, the 90 billion euro fund for Ukraine, and that will be approved and then handed off. But I got to say, folks, I've never seen winning this good. I mean, the Fidesz party, they won bigly, man. I think that's one of the biggest wins that's ever been seen in history. People were calling up from all over going, wow, what a big win. That was really something.
Yeah, it's almost like the people didn't appreciate the United States coming over and trying to meddle in their election. It seems like they didn't like that very much. And also seems like they didn't like the politician that they had previously put into power that was leaning Russian. They didn't like that either. So it looks like the time of the wannabe dictator is starting to come to a close in the world, or at least it is right now. Hopefully it keeps up because we don't want dictators and democracies. It looks like that time is starting to sort of wane off.
Yeah, it does seem as though I got to tell y'all, folks. I mean, it really kind of shows something, folks. Maybe like we were saying, maybe meddling in countries' foreign affairs is the one way that you really get them to show you that they don't like that. Like that's what we were saying. We say here on this channel that it's not really our business what goes on in another country or not. In their internal political affairs. That's for those people in that country to decide whether it's in our interest or not. But, some people, they know a whole lot better, and they love to go around, and they love to tell everyone what they should do, not even being from their country, and it looks like they might have backfired, from what we can tell, and it might have ended up losing any chance for Viktor Orban to maintain his seat as the Prime Minister of Hungary. As a matter of fact, his party was almost completely wiped out compared to their prior standing before this election. So a little bit interesting with that one, wouldn't y'all say? But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out of that little bit of news, because we also have been able to hear of other news further on north and within the North Sea in the Baltic. That was very interesting today. And moving us on up there, the Swedish were keeping an eye on things. This Gripen right here is actually flying over a Russian Varshavyanka-class submarine in the area of the Kattegat Strait, which connects the Baltic Sea to the North Sea. There's the little sub right there. Here's another picture of the little sub, and the Swedish Gripens flying overhead, keeping a little eye on the fella. Of course, they got to keep an eye on it. What else were they going to do? We also heard that the Swedish were very busy near to the port of Ystad today, as they also seized a bulk carrier under the name of Hui Wan. And apparently Swedish aviation observed the vessel committing environmental crimes by dumping pollutants into the sea, at least according to the Swedish allegations. The ship was transporting coal from Ust-Luga in Russia to Las Palmas in Spain. So very interesting one there. And also, I got to say that for this vessel right here on the back of the ship, it says Panama right there. I mean, that's rather interesting that a Panamanian vessel would be named Hui Wan. That doesn't really sound like, I got to say, folks, that doesn't really sound that Panamanian to me. Does it to you, Matthew?
No, it really doesn't. Not really. It sounds a little bit unlikely.
It sounds a little Zhonghua. You know what I mean? A little Zhonghua-di kind of a deal,
Yeah.
Yeah, a little Chinese is what I'm trying to say there. It's a very Chinese sort of a name there for a Panamanian flag ship, Kind of makes me think that it might be a Chinese ship that's just, operating a flag of convenience. But who's to say, folks? We'll have to find that out someday. Maybe there is some guy in Panama named Hui Wan. Who knows? But, you never know these days. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get on down into Soybia. Because we have been able to see that a significant air corridor has been operating throughout the entirety of the day over Europe. This is a time-lapse of the airlifts. And we also got the still image of the airlifts right here, which showed it in a much better light, or at least the intensity of the flights that are still being conducted in and out of the Middle East, which is suggesting that some sort of a plan for military action is going to be commencing at some point here within the future. Moving us on out of that news, it's now time for us folks to move on and into the Rossiyski Federacji and the ongoing war in Ukraine, because I'm sure that the Russian Federation, as always, is managing that one poorly, and strap yourselves in, folks, it is going very badly, and we've got something comical to cover today. Way up in the northern lands of the town of Volday, which is near to this lake in Russia, which is kind of mid, honestly, it's not even that good looking of a place, but up here near this town is a residence, and this residence is Putin's private one. Now, let me see if I can show it to you all right here. Here's some parts of the complex. You can see the helipads and whatnot, the private houses, the dachas, all that sort of stuff. This whole area over here is basically private estate, barracks, and bases to operate one of Putin's houses. Just one of them. It also has railway access right here as well at a railway station that allows for them to connect to the Russian railway system directly. They built this place up a lot and put a load of money into it, or at least Putin had the government put a load of money into it to turn it into a nice little playpen for himself. And today we've been able to understand that the playpen has gotten even further additional protection. Now we understand that there are 26 Pantsir S1s around this private residence. Another 7 have been added since the last time satellite photography went over this area. There are more Pantsir S1 air defense systems around this one house than there is in an entire Russian brigade at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Hell, honestly, more so a division of the Russian Federation. That's about how many Pantsirs they would have in the entirety of the division. They even have a whole whopping S-400 here, too. I mean, the air defense here is just unbelievable. I can actually show you all where that S-400 is here really quickly.
That's crazy to put that much stuff around just one mansion. That's wild.
It is. There it is. There's the S-400 right here. You can see the radar. You can see the TELs. Everything. Like, they legitimately have, folks, more air defenses around this one house than most every Russian city is provided, even including Moscow. I think Moscow has that many flak towers with Pantsirs on it around the whole city. Putin's house has more air defense than Moscow at this point, and it just keeps growing every single time we look at it. So we understand that apparently they're getting a little bit concerned about the house getting hit at some point, obviously. In the meantime, cities like Oriel, and you know, places with, you know, hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens living within it, are having to really get the highest tech equipment and the most cutting-edge systems to really make sure that their city is defended. Unlike Putin's house, which only houses himself and his staff, that, you know, keeps the place nice, this city here is a lot less significant. It only houses 300,000 people. It's not on a nice little lake, and it's not a nice little house, you know, that only supports one guy. This is a city that supports 300,000 common Russians. And we all know that that's far less important than Putin's little house. So the city of Oriel is having to get away with defending itself with this piece of shit right here, which we just saw today.
Look at that. They call this a Frankensam, by the way. That's what they call this thing right here. That's an abomination right there. It's hard to believe they're even using that.
Man, this is rough. So what it is, folks, it's a Ural 4320 that appears to have had a cab that caught on fire at some point, because it's very charred looking. Like, it looks like it may have caught on fire, but nevertheless, they added a cradle to the back of this thing that we think is like hand cranked or something, and on it is 4 R-77 air-to-air missiles. These are air-to-air missiles, mind you all. They're actually designed, folks, to be launched from a flying aircraft like an Su-30 and fired at another air target. And they've apparently rigged these missiles to where they can be launched off of this truck, or at least they could attempt to launch them off of this truck. And apparently this is what cities like Oriel, which are home to about 300,000 people, are having to use at this point for air defense systems, because all of the good ones are actually over at Putin's private mansion. So, you know, really prioritizing things.
You gotta love how that looks. Like, you know, the Russian people, I'm not sure how much they get to see of this, like, you know, about how like skewed it is toward like favoring Putin, especially with the air defense that we're seeing today. But it's like, look at the optics of that. It's like all the high-end, expensive, you know, advanced air defense systems, for whatever it's worth, because, you know, the Russian S-400 and those other systems, I wouldn't call those exactly, you know, advanced in the scheme of the entire world's, you know, stockpiles. But For Russia, though, it is advanced, and they stack it all around his mansions, like, and not just stack it around his mansions, they literally hoard it around the mansions, like that. They got like basically like a stockpile of air defense around that guy's mansions all over the place, and then the Russian people are left with like basically like what, like a parts bin, like putting stuff together from the trash pile, basically. So that's a horrible optic.
So they have a whole S-400 air defense battery, which is this, and then they have 26 of these. Meanwhile, a city of 330,000 people has this one air defense system, which is made out of literal scraps in a cave to defend the whole city of 300,000 people. That ought to let everyone know what the Russians are really about. Because if anyone's saying anything about Ukrainian corruption, I've never seen any corruption that is this blatant, that citizens are literally basically left to fend for themselves out of the literal, like, junkyards. They have to go put something together to try and defend the place. While, in the meantime, Putin's house has more layered air defense than Berlin did at the height of the Battle of Britain in 1940, and 1943 and everything else. That's just unbelievable, and it's insane to actually see the dichotomy between the Russian elites and those of the common folk of Russia. A truly despotic situation, to be sure. But moving us on out of that little development in Russia, because clearly Putin is a wise man beyond his years. He screws over all the common people, commoners, much like all of us here right now, to help himself, and nothing ever says a wise and caring leader like being a selfish ass. But moving on from that, we also were able to see that within Kursk, the Russians were using a little mobile unit to try and shoot down an incoming Ukrainian drone. This is one of the first times we've ever seen the Russians do something like this, and have footage to show for it. Oh, God! Oh, my man, that's loud.
Oh. Whoa.
Whoopa.
Oh.
Bro, they're literally firing into the dead of night. Hey, bro, they don't even know where it's at.
Oh, the blessed tracers.
Oh, so this guy's just literally got an AK. Oh my God, dude, this guy's an air defense soldier. He's just using a normal AK to try and shoot this thing down.
Yeah, that's pitiful.
Oh my God. Oh, something blipped out there. Oh, this guy's got a man pad. This guy back here's got apparently a DP-28 from World War II. Backblast much.
Oh my God. Man, this dude almost took out his comrade right there. This dude right here is almost finished. He almost got Swiss cheesed by this thing. Look at this.
Rest in peace to Granny. She got hit by a bazooka.
Almost got hit by a real one. Oh my God. I know that was there had to be some effect from that right there. That dude was literally ripped up the grass right in front of his feet.
Oh my God, he stood right in the backblast and filmed it. What an idiot. There it goes. Is it going to hit something? No. Gee, this guy doesn't learn. Like, this guy never learns. Look at this.
He loves the backblast. It makes him feel hollow inside. He's like, I was trying to feel the backblast to know if my brain will rattle. I'm not sure if it's there anymore.
Oh my God. Oh. Well, they did get one drone, finally.
At the cost of one Vatnik.
Meanwhile, this guy...
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy. Yeah,
He's already gone a little stupid from the backblast. He's already gotten there a little bit.
Bro, he's sitting there behind that man, but he said, what in the world is going on here, Cameron? I'm in the right after he fired. It's like, man, he was lost. It's over for him. Oh, they did get another one as well. They're really having to whip out a lot of these man pads to try and... Oh. Igor never learns to get out of the backblast in none of these clips. He's in the backblast every time. Oh, what's this? This must be pants here, maybe.
Man, those control panels in that whatever that vehicle was right there was like straight out of the freaking Cold War like movie era. Like, look at that. They got the what do they call that? The tube TV over there or something? The CRT monitors. They got the old stuff here. Look, they got the analog little gauges at the top. This is like straight from like the era that's gone by a long time ago.
Bruh, this guy is like living in like the 70s in the Cold War, man. They're like, we have bombers on the radar. Oh my god, this is insane. What type of an air defense system was this anyways? Oh wait, we might be able to tell.
They was probably using this back when Vlad the Impaler was still around.
No way. That might have been an S-300 that we just saw right there.
Yeah, I think so.
Jeez, dude, those things are way behind the times if the control caps look like that. They did take down a drone, though. It's kind of... Good God! Why do they have a microphone on this thing? Like, what?
It makes it sound like they got a minigun attached to it.
Oh my God!
Damn. Man, even the sound effects sound like it's from the Cold War era. This is like straight out of Call of Duty.
Oh, there goes another manpad. This time Igor wasn't in the backblast. Bachna. You know, it's crazy. They finally showed all this footage, but it's like, where the hell was all this air defense when they hit like Ust-Luga and Primorsk and everywhere else? It's like, I never saw it. Oh, now they even have those noise effects for their outros. Huh. They live in the olden days over there, folks.
Man, it's all about rattling the brain. The Russians, they're trying to find out like all the Ivans on the battlefield. They're like, I'm not sure if my brain's still intact anymore. I need to rattle my brain to make sure it's still there. So they do these like tones and sounds and stuff like that to see if their brain's still working.
Man. Sadly, the answer is the jury's out. It's still not working. We also were able to see the Ukrainian ATESH unit lighting up a engine in Russia. You see them pouring gas all over the control surfaces in the cab. You know, just doing what they do. La, da, 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 and whoosh, and it's on fire. Oh, that looks bright.
Oh.
Man, it looks nice and warm in there, real cozy.
Yeah, it's a nice winter day in the, what is this, a truck that they're doing this to?
This is a train, actually.
Oh, wow. The train just got a brand new heater installed, it looks like, and it is boiling.
It's literally glowing white in there. It's like, that's hot enough to melt the steel, honestly. It's like, damn.
Oh.
It's like,
Oh my
what are
God.
they pouring there, dude? Like, they look like they're pouring gas. That is not even like orange, folks. Like, usually like gas like burns like in this orangish yellow color. That's like straight white. I don't know what the hell they poured in there, but it is burning pretty hot.
Man, meanwhile, somebody's near the back of the train going, "Hey, conductor, turn down the heater. It's getting boiling back here. What's going on up there?" It's like, well, the brand new heater has no controls. It's a little bit of a runaway.
The engineer and the brakeman is going to show up tomorrow to run this train. They're going to be like, what the hell? Like, they're going to go in the cab. Everything's going to be charcoal black in there. Like, everything's going to be burnt. They're just going to be completely confused as to what happened. But they burned down from what we could tell. Also, we can see a meme right here. That's a shame. And it really is. That's a real shame. But moving us on out of that, it is time for us to get on into the war in Ukraine itself. Because we have plenty of news here, folks, to talk about from the war today. Oh, heavens. Even in the midst of the Ukraine war ceasefire, there's not a lot ceasing of the fire going on. Well, moving this on down to location unknowns, we did get to see that on this day of the war, progress has been made.
They hung stuff from the side of a bike right there. That's a very sad sight.
Man, that's not just stuff. That's 120 millimeter mortar shells.
That is 3 mortars right there, as you can see. Notice the technique here. The safety first. Russians always say, we must adhere to safety standards. We don't want, oh shit, their version of oh shit to come along and have a word or write them up on a report. We must do this the safe way, which is to adhere it to the side of the bicycle seat.
Man, you know there was some Russian commander out there. Put the mortars on the bicycle. Sir, I want you to sign off on this order. Bam! I've been here for 20 years, and I've always said, safety first. Now I want the motors on the bicycle. We're going to put them on the bicycle. And then some Russian soldier had to go biking around with 3 120mm mortar shells in between his legs. I think that this is going to come around, folks, to a drone clip from Ukraine of them hitting one of these bikes, and that thing is going to go up like a small bomb. Like, it's going to go off. And we're here for it, and we're going to be waiting for that to happen one day. We also got to see in this other clip here some tanks of the Ukrainian 4th Brigade. And they're really getting festive looking. I mean, they're really getting the camo up and running really here. I mean, holy moly! Look at this, Matthew. Look at it. Look at the beauty, the craftsmanship.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It does. It's incredible, really. It's amazing, and we love to see it. Those are the T-64 BVs of the 4th Brigade, the Rubish, and it does appear that they're still around, surprisingly enough. We actually don't know how, because the Ukrainians have taken some pretty decent armored losses compared to their pre-war figures, and yet they still have tanks, which is honestly kind of crazy. But anyways, outside of that, we have been able to see that a lot of people are currently talking about that whole air defense hoarding thing that's happening up at Valday, while cities like Oreo are literally fighting for the scraps in terms of air defense. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we're addressing the new hoarding thing right here. They could develop a whole new TV show called Hoarders, Russian edition. But in Russia, they don't just hoard anything. They hoard the most advanced air defenses around the top leaders' mansions. So it's a different type of hoarding, a very expensive habit. Also, now they're saying Russia's military is very vulnerable because now they're using Frankensams to defend the cities, while Putin, who's not even there at the house, by the way, puts all this air defense around his place. So what are your thoughts? What's going to happen? 36% said Putin is worried about a coup, and that's why he's putting it there. It's not to protect it from Ukraine, it's to protect the mansions from his own people. Well, 30% said the Russian military won't say a word on it, and 26% said the Russian military will eventually revolt. And at this point, I don't really have much faith that the Russian military is going to do anything about it because, we just watched a guy almost get blasted by a backblast from a freaking missile. So I'm not sure if they're going to be saying anything. So I think that Putin's putting that there because he's worried about maybe something happening with Ukraine possibly, and he's just so selfless, Putin is, that he couldn't spare a single system, not even a morsel for the people. He had to put that around his house. And of course, you know how it works in Russia. It's just all about the great leader. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, it's all about the great leader. He's basically, you know what they say, Matthew. The great leader is next to godliness. And while that would be blaspheming and absolute heresy to even suggest or depict something like that, that's how they do it in Russia. Definitely not something that we do in America. If it was being done, maybe we need to stop that through some means. Maybe a democratic solution. But outside of that, I would have to say that I do believe that Putin is scared that the Ukrainians are going to obliterate the house, because generally, Putin is fairly paranoid from what we can tell. That's also why he has the 50-foot-long tables that he uses for his meetings, where whoever he's meeting has to sit on the complete opposite end of the 50-foot-long table, so they can't even get close to him to try and kill him. And so I would generally believe that's the same sort of situation here with the house, as they scared the Ukrainians might try and blow it up, and I guess for some reason he really likes that one, so they're putting an endless amount of air defenses around it to try and stop the Ukrainians from ever possibly landing a hit onto the house. So I hope that does address it the best I can. I have a feeling the coups won't really be that big of an issue in Russia, at least for now. And generally, if there was a coup, that would mostly be conducted in Moscow and really have nothing to do with the house. The house would be a sideshow of a coup, generally, so it wouldn't be a point of defense for that many air defense systems. But anyways, moving us on from that, it's now time for us to get on into the front lines in Ukraine. But before we do, we have a couple of pieces of news that came out of Kyiv. For one, while the Russians are skimping on air defenses everywhere but Putin's mansions, a private air defense system with a remote-controlled M2 gun turret is now alive in Ukraine, a Defense Ministry advisor stated. Flash says the turrets have a range of up to 2 kilometers because it uses a 50 caliber machine gun, an M2 50 caliber, to guard critical infrastructure, and any business can order them. So while the Russians are absolutely stripping the nation of air defense to protect one of Putin's houses, the Ukrainians are trying to mass produce viable air defense systems for the masses to protect the citizenry and critical infrastructure. Isn't that something? Kind of shows where the priorities of those governments lie. The Russians' priorities lie around their leader, the Ukrainians' lies around their people. And, that kind of ought to be showing us here who in the world we should be backing in the fight, because I'm generally not one who supports, self-absorbed people. I generally think that that's kind of a little bit defeatist, really. But also we were able to hear that apparently there's been some major, and I mean major, ceasefire violations. Kyiv says that Russia has committed 2,299 violations of the Easter ceasefire. And we also were able to see that apparently the Russians claim that Ukraine violated it 1,971 times. Well, that's interesting. It's still, the Russians violated it first, which is what counts. And then secondly, the Ukrainians, even according to the Russians' claims, violated the ceasefire less than they did. So either way, the Russians once again proved themselves to be bastards as usual. They broke the ceasefire like hell. Moving us on out of Kyiv, it's now time for us to get to the little bit of frontline news that we had today, which was entirely around the town of Konstantinivka. Here, we were able to see some Ukrainian sappers of the Tsunami National Police Brigade at work clearing out some mines. And we see them here moving on in and getting ready to start demining.
What is this that they're attaching to the tree right here?
It's barbed wire.
That is actually very smart to do that with the truck. That's actually pretty impressive. That's something you'd see in Alabama right there. That's a Alabama ingenuity.
Man, that redneck ingenuity. Yeah!
Now, is it barbed wire or is it razor wire?
It's technically razor wire.
Because it's got little razors on it. But it's like, if it's barbed, I mean, isn't that basically the same thing as razor wire?
Technically, it's slightly different. Like, barbed wire is where you take the wire and you actually, create a specific knot with it where it has points sticking out on both ends. Razor wire is where the razor is, actually integrated into the wire, basically.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with barbed wire. I know how bad that is. Literally a tetanus, central, especially if it's rusty or something like that. It's been sitting outside for a while. Very bad. But I've never really seen razor wire up close.
Yeah, razor wire is something interesting. Pretty neat, actually. Let me pull it up. Razor wire.
I'm assuming you can't shave with it.
Oh, absolutely not, oh boy. That'd be crazy. Here, in the second, once this clip is over and we watch them defuse these explosives with a bomb on the end of a stick, which is pretty interesting to see, then I'll show you what the difference is between razor wire and barbed wire. I mean, they're really...
I see everybody saying that razor wire is deadly. I mean, it looks like it could be deadly, possibly. I mean, if you tripped and fell in that, it looks like you could be finished.
I mean, these guys, this is kind of crazy. They're literally just putting bombs on sticks, putting them near the mines, and then running away and letting them explode. That's some pretty crazy demining work right there. Great success! Now, it's time to show Matthew what razor wire looks like up close. This is what razor wire looks like.
Oh, yeah, that's a doozy there. That's really something right there. Okay, razor wire is way worse than barbed wire. It looks like barbed wire might be like a puncture. Razor wire is going to slice you open if you get on top of that. That's going to be rough.
Yeah, barbed wire is just uncomfortable. Razor wire is deadly. It's that's the big difference. Barbed wire was what a lot of people would know from the First World War and the Second World War, because that was the kind of defensive wire that was used back then. Nowadays, though, it's basically all razor wire. I don't really believe that there's a lot of anything else that's used, except I did see some people mentioning this concertina wire right here, which is kind of like razor wire, but not as much. That's probably the best way I can explain, is that the not really the serrated, but the sharp edges of the concertina wire is a little bit smaller, but it still produces the same effect for the large part as razor wire. But anyways, it's time for us to move on out of the small little discussion on razor wire and barbed wire, and time for us to move on into our next clip, where we were able to see a Czechoslovakian provided Czech provided RM-70 Vampire being used as an MLRS within the 110th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Very neat system to see. Great to know that the Ukrainians are still getting great use out of the foreign-provided equipment that they've been using quite well for years. But with that, folks, that is the end of the news that we had for today. I would show you all the speech from Zelensky. It was a very good Easter address. Sadly, though, it had music in it. And music scares us a great deal these days because of cease and desists and copyrights and whatnot. So we sadly won't be able to show that one. But with that in mind, it is time for us to get on into the question segment where we get to talk to each and every single one of you. And I got to say, folks, that it's an absolute blast. It's always a blast to be able to get into these question segments. And not only that, on the wings of another successful fundraiser, once again, we have raised $3,250 tonight for the USO, and I got to say that that's a wonderful and amazing thing to know that the Lee Spring Army has gathered around again to support the USO and to help to keep the morale of our soldiers high over there. And so a humongous thanks to all of y'all so much once again. Matthew, do we have any top donors in between the last segment and this one to call out and mention?
Yes, we do. We have some top donors to call out. And also, by the way, we are just sitting shy of $3,300 raised right now. So fantastic work, by the way. And once again, a huge shout out to literally everybody that donated tonight to help us to get to that number right there. Smashing the goal for sure. But to call off our top donors, since the last segment, we did have a 400 from Truck and Chef, which is a massive one, by the way. A huge shout out to Truck and Chef for that massive generosity to the fundraiser. Also, a big shout out to Zeke Rose, also known as Hal Rose, yet again, for throwing in a 333. And that does confirm to me that is Hal Rose right there with the traditional 333 for the fundraiser, that is. And a huge shout out to you, Hal. Also, a huge shout out to Chris Feilbach. He threw in a 250, also very generous to the fundraiser. Then we had a 100 from Samuel Sozamonski, as well as a 100 from Scuderia, which sounds like it could be related to a Ferrari. Also, there's a 50 from Gabruzel the Great, as well as a Rad Doctor, Yosid Man, as well as Howard Mendelson and Andrew Posey. And a huge shout out to everybody once again, even if we were not able to call you off, because once again, every single Sunday we've been running these things and the LSA has always come through every single time. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to say a humongous shout out to everybody who supported the fundraiser tonight. It's been an absolutely incredible night once again, and it's a beautiful and amazing thing to know that so many people have continued to support these fundraisers and help out on the folks and the soldiers of this republic that we cover the news on. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And before we move on, I saw a lot of people mention that I did not actually address the casualty report, which y'all are correct. I actually apparently skipped over that. So let's get to that really quickly and break it on down. This was also provided to us today by none other than Miss Disa. A humongous thanks to Miss Disa for always providing this to us. And the Russian losses from the 12th of April on this day of 1509 are as follows. 8 tanks is above recent average. 73 artillery pieces is tied for the 13th highest daily loss, an incredibly high one. 2,081 UAVs ranks as the 16th highest, and also 261 auto and fuel tanks is the 18th highest. Over the past 24 hours of the war, we were able to see that 1,070 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed, along with 8 main battle tanks, 3 APCs, 73 artillery pieces, 1 MLRS, 1 air defense system, 2,081 drones, and 216 supply trucks and fuel trucks. So an incredibly good day, to say the least, and once again showing that the Ukrainian armed forces are really holding them down and keeping that line secure. And so with that, now that we've gotten through every piece of the news at this point, including the casualty report, huge shout out once again to Miss Disa for providing that to us and always doing the work to compile those spreadsheets and keep them well and truly calculated. It is time for us to move on and into all of the questions that we have for the night. And so Matthew, please take it away.
All right, so it's time to get to our super chats, our live chat questions, and our Morse code decoders. But first of all, let's get the Morse. Tonight we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Kubateric, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse code said, "We one day pray that the Republic will see a wise guiding hand." LLT, LSA.
And ding, 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 shh. And that's the sound of money. Y'all hit that down on the nail, and that was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly, incredibly, for getting that correct time and time again. And I'd hope that one day we do have a wise guiding hand and as the president of this republic, because it would be a benefit to the citizenry and a benefit to the nation at large. But sadly, those days are not today, unfortunately. But anyways, with that, we are on and into the questions. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so addressing our super chats first and then getting into our live chat questions, we did get a $20 support from Tankers, and thank you very much, Tankers, for that 20. He said, again, thanks y'all for the news you provide, 20 for the fundraiser and 20 for y'all. Thank you for the unpolitical news and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this news possible each and every day. And we try our best to make sure that our analysis is neutral and unbiased. And I got to tell y'all that that is a really tall order these days, with the type of stuff that's coming out, like, the blaspheming and everything. So I do thank you incredibly for really appreciating our work on that, because I got to tell y'all folks, it's getting a lot harder these days, especially today, given what happened or what was posted on air, to really try and keep the whole thing neutral. But anyways, with that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from Impuritan, who said, thank you guys and LSA.
And thank you so much for the incredible support in Puritan, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Saved Not Soft, who said each country should choose 8 of their toughest, lock them in an arena with no weapons, and televise it. Damn, okay. He said all proceeds going to Children of War, winner take all. That sounds like something from the Roman eras or something like that. Are we going back to the Colosseum days? I don't know about that. That sounds like maybe the Hunger Games or something, or maybe gladiator times, I guess. But the gladiators had weapons. They're saying no weapons. I mean, I don't know about that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't know about that. I think that's a step, a couple of steps back, societally in progression. I mean, it's an idea, but I just don't know. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it myself. But big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Oliver. He said, about China, I believe they will asymmetrically threaten Taiwan or Japan, or provide even more support to our enemies instead of the options in the poll that we addressed earlier.
That's actually what I was saying earlier, Oliver, as one of their possible reprisals against us. And I would say that that's probably a high likelihood, if one of the most easiest options for them to take to try and get back at us. And so a huge thanks to you for support and helping the channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Oliver yet again. He said, don't tell me what to do. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. By the way. Also, by the way, like the weird thing is these days, YouTube allows people to throw in super chats on Sunday, which we had previously never really had that because it wasn't really a thing. We usually just kept it to the donations, but there's a workaround now. I'm not sure if YouTube intentionally did that or maybe they just forgot to take the feature out, but we're not complaining. We like the support, but also at the same time, though, we generally prioritize the donations on Sunday, but we do appreciate support nonetheless. But Enforcer, what say you?
I do have to say that we greatly appreciate the support, and it's something that YouTube allows. We do thank everyone greatly for the support, even on Sundays. It's just that we always want to make sure to try and striate it as much as possible to make it clear where the money's going for transparency's sake. So, back in the day, up until this loophole existed, every single Sunday, if you threw in $1 to this channel in any way through YouTube, you guaranteed knew that that was just going to a fundraiser. And then every other day of the week, it was going to support the channel. Nowadays, it generally is the case that you can throw in support to the channel whenever you want, which kind of makes the stratification a lot less visible and evident, and that's kind of the unfortunate reality of that whole side of things, which is, it kind of annoys me a good bit, because I like to try and make it as obvious as we can where the money is going on each day, but I'm just, I'll be entirely honest with you, I think we do that to an extreme, because, to be entirely honest, that's kind of on the viewer. Like if you're supporting a fundraiser or a super chat, I mean, YouTube makes that very clear through the UI, but I still try our best to differentiate that, and YouTube made that loophole, so it kind of defeated that whole deal. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 2 from Born in Ukraine who said, do you think Belarus in 2029 will follow Hungary in LSA? And I do not. I don't think they will. Belarus is a different situation. They are the closest thing to a Russian puppet state to the extreme that you can possibly see when it comes to countries surrounding Russia. It's not going to be the same thing as Hungary. Hungary had EU ties. Like, even though the guy in charge was not very friendly to the EU, it obviously still had ties to it. So it's a lot different. Belarus is essentially controlled by Russia. Hungary was influenced by Russia, but not controlled. world. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also in Belarus, they don't have free and fair elections. Lukashenko's literally been the leader of Belarus since it became an independent country, largely without exception. And so there really isn't a way for that to happen in Belarus like it did in Hungary today. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know. And a big thanks to you for support and helping the channel to keep it running. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the live chat question. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's time for some live chats. Let's start with our first one here, and this one's going to go to Scott. And Scott said, "What, if anything, is going on with the ports along the Caspian Sea, and where the Russians can resupply Iran?"
Generally, nothing is happening at all. The Israelis hit a couple of Iranian naval vessels that I believe are at Bandar and Zali, but we haven't ever seen them hit any sort of commercial ports or vessels that would be within those ports. So generally, the situation there is uneventful, and those supply lines are fully intact, because trying to impede those supply lines could lead to a confrontation with the Russians. And generally, Israel is actually kind of friendly with the Russians. Actually, they're friendly with the Russians just up front. And we also here in the U.S. government currently are a little bit friendly with the Russians as well. So, generally everyone wants to avoid getting them angry, because obviously the Russians are the blessed ones, But beyond that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from Mad Max. He said, "Do you two think that the U.S. will do the blockade completely and let no country not like the blockade in Cuba, or let no country through?" I think he meant to say. I think here's my honest take on what's about to happen with this blockade situation. The U.S. is not ready to start a war with China. And also, I would say we should avoid that. We should definitely not walk toward a war with China. That's not smart. It's not time for that. We're currently depleting our stocks of precision munitions inside of Iran. The last thing we want to do while we're running low on interceptors and missiles is start a war with one of the most formidable superpowers in the world. We don't want to do that. So we want to avoid that. I think the U.S. might end up backing off of this situation. They might back off the blockade, or it might be a lot less aggressive than they're making it out to be. Because if they go all the way, I mean, I'm not sure what the hell these clowns that are in charge are thinking. If they go all the way with this and they start literally going head to head with China, these fools they're not fit. Let's just put it that way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I have a feeling, folks, this is what's about to happen. We're about to blockade the place legitimately, and we're going to threaten our allies that if their ships go through, it's going to be hell to pay. And then as soon as the Chinese ship comes rolling up, or a Russian one, we'll let them right through without a problem. That's probably what we're going to do, because that's basically what we did at Venezuela, which we pointed out on the channel back when that was going on, that was really stupid and idiotic, because that's not a blockade. That's just, selectively allowing people to enter and exit the country, which isn't a blockade. And we're probably about to do the same thing in Iran. I'll be entirely honest with y'all, folks. I'm about as fed up with the stupidity in the current administration and their foreign policy and their handling of things that I could get. If that comes through in our coverage, well, you're picking that up properly. And if you don't like it, then that's sad for you. You must be a clown, because if you think that anything that's being done at this point on the foreign policy level makes any sense at all, you don't know anything about foreign policy to even have a say in it. To be entirely honest, because that is how it's about to go, folks. Because we don't want a confrontation with China, and for some reason the current administration seems to be pretty chummy with the Russians, so the Russians will get a pass no matter what, and the Chinese will go through because we don't want a confrontation with them. So I hope that does address it the best I can. This blockade, as far as what it should be achieving, is going to achieve basically nothing. So with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from Mad Max yet again. He said, "What countries do you two think will be helping with the blockade?" And I think I've heard so far, I think Britain bowed out. I think they've already bowed out of the situation. Let me see who the other one was. Do you happen to know off the bat which other country bowed out? Australia and Britain. So apparently those are the two right now. I was just trying to make sure, as I thought there was another one that had bowed out as well. I think they're trying to form a coalition with France, possibly doing something separate from the United States to possibly get that situation fixed. But the general consensus is among Europe is they don't really want to work with the United States. And at this point, I really can't blame them. If I had to work with this crazy shit going on right now, I'd probably rip my hair out. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say no one's really going to join it. I mean, like the statement. Here's the thing, folks. The statements by the president mean literally nothing they're just bullshit. Like multiple countries are going to join us. No one's joining us. I mean, there's no confirmation that anyone's going to join us. No country in the world has made an official statement that they're going to join us. It's bullshit. No one's going to join us because no one has joined us for anything yet. Why in the world would they change their minds now? And what are we going to do? Threaten them more and piss them off more, and somehow making them even angrier with us is going to make them more apt to help us? That's not going to happen. So nobody's coming to help us out with that. We're going to be conducting the blockade entirely on our own, and it's not even going to be an effective blockade. And that's also going to be the other issue that people aren't going to want to join over, because say if the French join, they're going to enforce that across the board even-handedly. So that when they try and stop a Russian ship, then they're going to get in a fight with the United States. The United States is going to cuss them out for stopping a Russian ship. And then the French are going to back out then, because they're going to be like, well, this is stupid as hell. This isn't a blockade. This is just doing nothing, really, because those are the two countries and the ships that we're trying to stop from getting through, rather than Iran's, is Russia and China's. And then we're just going to basically let those through because we don't want a confrontation with them, or we like them. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because I don't think this is going to be achieving anything, and I'll be completely upfront. There's not a single nation in the world that's going to join us, because, like, dealing with the stupidity they've had to deal with for a year and 4 months, they're done, and they don't want to join in. And also on top of that, if they join in, I'm sure there are a couple of tweets will be thrown their way, even in the midst of them helping us out and putting their own people in harm's way, about how stupid and weak they are and how helpless they are and all that. And everyone's tired of being, shit on by some clown, basically. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Jennifer, who said, do you think that the U.S. will flip the script and position themselves to take a toll in the Strait?
No, I don't really think. Maybe, but not really. I don't think so. Because generally that would start to meet a significant amount of international condemnation, and instead of Iran being the problem, then it would be the U.S. that's the problem. And I think a lot of people have gotten so tired of the U.S. really wouldn't have enough international backing in the world to see that that would be viable, because Europe would be angry with us. The Axis powers would be angry at us. The Middle East would be angry at us. Literally anyone that would have been an ally or was an enemy, all of them would be angry at us and would be condemning us. And that wouldn't put us in a good position whatsoever. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from K-Man, who said, has more than one Russian ship delivered oil to Cuba so far?
Only one has so far. We're believing that a second one's on the way, and we also believe that it'll be getting the red carpet treatment as well, and going straight to Havana probably. So pretty much defeating the whole purpose of the blockade, because the blockade isn't even operational really, or achieving anything, rather than just having a whole bunch of people sit around and watch a Russian ship go into a port. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from Music Uploader, who said, I've seen a report today that Erdogan's allegedly threatening to invade Israel, and is that true? Now, I haven't seen that. I saw somebody actually emailed me about that earlier today. I'm trying to look for it. I haven't really seen anything threatening to invade Israel, but the tensions between Erdogan and Netanyahu in Israel are skyrocketing through the roof. They're exchanging like Twitter messages. I saw one from Netanyahu directed at Turkey earlier, and there's always some underlying tensions between those two, but it looks like they're starting to flare up again. And I wouldn't be surprised if threats started getting lobbed between the two here in the coming days. I wouldn't be surprised about that. But it looks like those are pretty much going higher and higher. I can't tell really what the root of it is. I think the problem might be Turkey is kind of going at Israel because they believe that Israel is trying to pretty much sabotage any type of hope of peace in the Middle East, and then Israel's saying they have to go take care of the Iranian proxies, and Turkey is supporting the Iranian terrorist groups. It's stuff like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I haven't heard of any threats to invade Israel. I have heard that they've been throwing around accusations that the other group is terrorists and whatnot over the course of the day. But I haven't seen any threats to invade Israel at the moment from Turkey. So I'd have to say that those probably don't exist, and that might be someone out there trying to push a certain story for some reason, probably to get some attention. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Sean, and Sean said, could the United Nations charge American ships with piracy if they seize any ships?
No, not really, because the United Nations is completely powerless to do anything to anyone because the United States of America, Russia, China, Britain, and France are all permanent members of the UN Security Council, meaning that they have a permanent veto right on the UN, and that means that if anyone ever tried to pass a resolution like that, a lot like the Russians have done with everything in the war in Ukraine, they just veto it and it gets nowhere. So no one would ever be able to declare us pirates on the high seas because if somehow that was a unanimous resolution, we'd still be able to veto it because we have that right under the UN Charter, and it would get absolutely nowhere and it would never be ratified or passed. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We've also got a question from Connecticut, also known as Connecticut to everybody else. He said, if Israel attacks Turkey and they invoke Article 5, would the U.S. have to invade Israel? And what about vice versa?
Generally, the U.S. would probably bow out of that one. For reasons. But outside of that, though, I would say that technically we could start conducting military actions against Israel if that happened, if we were abiding by our Article 5 obligations. But generally, that's probably not going to happen because while the United States might not join in, if Israel went out of its way to attack Turkey and Turkey invoked Article 5, to be entirely frank, Europe doesn't really like Israel the way the U.S. government likes Israel. They probably go down there and start smacking them around a little bit just for the hell of it to see how far they could go with it. So, the Israelis probably understand that, and that's probably why they wouldn't want to do that because, God forbid the French or the British come down there and start lobbing a couple of missiles your way. Very different than the Iranians trying to do it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have another one from Carl, and he said, well, "My question is, what do you make of using Marines as pirates when they were founded primarily to combat pirates?" Now, I don't think they're not going to be engaging in piracy. Like, I don't think that's what they're trying to do here. They're saying they'll try to seize vessels that try to run the blockade that have been paying the Iranian toll. So I don't think they're trying to like go steal the ships. If they do something like that, that's not really consistent with their statements to the large degree. So I don't think they'll be doing that. But Enforcer, what say you?
They wouldn't be doing that. And also, pirates are bandits who operate without a banner or a flag. A nation's navy or marines cannot operate as pirates because they are a legitimate force of a sovereign government somewhere. So that largely defeats the concept of piracy. So I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a question from Christy Huva, who said, if the ships make it through the Strait of Hormuz with Iranian escorts, wouldn't our military be able to plot and map what area that is clear of mines? Thereby, they know where they need to clear out the mines that Iran put out there.
Yes, that is actually correct. And that's also another thing, that I'm sitting here thinking today. If those destroyers did make it through the Strait of Hormuz like CENTCOM claimed and all the way back, well, they know a path that's clear of mines now. You can start doing convoy escorts through there and just deal with the Iranian fire from the shoreline as it comes in. And there you go. The blockade's over at that point for the larger part because the oil is flowing once again. It's just so stupid how many obstacles are being done around this and how much people want to say, oh, it's impossible, because like the same people who are saying that it's impossible and we have to come up with 40 chess moves, or as I like to call it, 40 idiocy moves to be able to figure out how to open the strait. It's like if the destroyers literally went through it, like CENTCOM said, and like everyone in the U.S. government saying, well, then the blockade doesn't even exist at that point. It's a bullshit blockade. We know where the mines aren't right now, and it's not like the mines have motors on them and they float around. They're generally tethered in place. So plot out those paths, go gather up some tankers and say, we're all going through the strait. Follow us in a perfect line on this path, and there you go. And if anyone fires at you from the Iranian coast, the destroyers can deal with that easily. And if you have air cover to boot, they can also help with lightening the load on the destroyers and what they're having to defend against. And there you go, the blockade's over. It's just so dumb how in the hell like all these different statements are being made that make it clear that this whole blockade is basically fantasy for the larger part. It's not as big a deal as they keep making it, where it's like, oh, we can't directly just bomb them and open it, so we got to come up with this whole stupid thing. It's like, no, you can literally just bomb them and open it. Like we're already largely proving that right now. If anything, the threat that they would pose to our warships is probably the threat the Houthis posed, and the Navy dealt with them fine, so they could deal with Iran fine too. But anyways, I hope that does address that well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Logan. He said, how exactly are we demining the strait? I thought we sent the last of the minesweepers the U.S. had to the shipyard.
That's correct. We would be demining the strait through autonomous demining vessels that would be operated from littoral combat ships or the destroyers themselves, like the Arleigh Burkes, which I found funny today, folks, because I was saying on my shore video today, I was like, that's interesting. Those Arleigh Burkes, if they did go through, they really have no way to pick up a mine. So then a whole bunch of people wanted to tell me that I was wrong by saying, well, the Arleigh Burkes are actually capable of picking up mines because they're capable of loading up a module that has a demining vessel on it that can then pick up the mines. And it's like, yeah, but they don't use that while they're underway. They have to stop and be stationary to use it, and they didn't do that. So it's like it's like I just gotta say, folks, it's always funny to me how people always want to say, well, unfortunately, you're wrong, and 90% of the time they're wrong on how a system works, because it's like that's like my bread and butter is history and knowing generally in a broader sense how military systems work. I won't tell you what circuit boards in them, but I'll tell you all the basic concept behind them, and then people want to be like, "Oh, unfortunately, you're wrong." It's like, come on. But outside of that,
you know what they say, like these sailors that are on these mine sweeping vessels. You know what they say when they come across the mines?
What do they say?
They say that's mines.
Ah, man, that's God. I get it.
Yeah, you gotta admit that's look at that. I'll tell you what, the best.
Man, it's the greatest, really, truly, it's amazing. But beyond that, though, generally we do have demining capabilities. It's just that the purpose-built mine-sweeping vessels are no longer around, and it would still be a pretty arduous and laborious task to find them, because we have to clear out the sea grid by grid, like the Minesweeper game that some of y'all might have played on the computer before, and that takes time, especially considering that it's involving real people that could get hurt or killed if they do it wrong. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we're on to the next one.
Someone in the chat, Texas Trish, they said, bad joke. Well, see, that's what I'm doing here. I'm doing a thing called 4D comedy. It's a new type of thing, quantum comedy. The joke itself is not funny. It's supposed to be the bad joke that's funny, actually. So it's like a layered joke. The joke sucks, but you're supposed to laugh at the joke sucking. That's what you're supposed to be laughing at. It's a little bit of a new thing. We call this the best jokes. Some say the jokes that you don't really want to hear, but you kind of have to hear it because they're so good that you have to hear it. But anyways, though, jumping into our next question, this one goes to Spicy Dorito, who said, if China chooses to test us, couldn't we just threaten to close the Panama Canal to Chinese shipping?
Not really. Without seeing even further repercussions, because you have to always remember that with every action we make, there is a chance of an equal or opposite reaction happening from the other side. The world is never static, so if you escalate that way, then the Chinese are going to escalate in another way that we might not be able to predict right now. And then the situation might even be worse for us, and they might be able to whip something out to where we go, damn, we didn't see that one coming. We kind of just screwed ourselves right there. That's why the answer to everything isn't always escalating for the sake of escalation. Oh, that'll get them. Because sometimes they really get you in response to that. Like right now, for example, here's the funny one. Iran's blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. The most direct way of dealing with this is just forcibly opening the Strait of Hormuz. But instead, folks, we've decided to go with an escalatory action, which is creating a blockade on top of a blockade, so that way, instead of everyone having a problem with just Iran, now they can actually have a problem with us instead. So China can come up and try and break the blockade and have one of their ships boarded and seized possibly, which then creates a problem with China, and then that might turn into a war with China, possibly. Or they might do something else in turn, like start seizing our vessels that are somewhere in East Asia. Now we have a bigger problem, and now we have to figure out, do we back off and let the Chinese go through our blockade, and they also seized a couple of our ships, now we're at a greater loss than we were at the start, or do we try and ramp this up a little bit more and see if we can get the best of them, which in reality we won't, because at the end of it all, we'll just go to war with them, or they'll go to war with us, and that'll really show us what we got coming to us, according to the Chinese, if it really came to that point. Because there's no such thing in the outside world, in this foreign policy world, of, oh, that'll really show them, and then it ends there. There's a point that you might piss off a country like China enough that they go, you know what? I'm going to beat their ass. And then they go to war with us, and then we're way a shit creek without a paddle, and nobody expected that it was going to get to that point. But because we kept taking escalatory measures in response to anything that they did, we basically blew it up into a war with China. And that's why that might not be the greatest idea. It might just be better for us to take the most straightforward approach instead of trying to make the idiotic ideas of an old man work. Maybe we ought to just forcibly reopen the strait because it looks like it would be fairly easy compared to everything else that we're coming up with. That's like conducting mental gymnastics
You said easy to force a strait open.
Shit, it'd be easier than everything else we're doing right now. I mean, like in terms of like the effect, like, like right now we're blockading the blockade to see that maybe they'll put enough pressure on China that China might pressure Iran and that might work for them to open the strait. It's like, who the hell can guarantee that any of those moving parts of this plan will work at all? Most of them probably won't. It's like we probably have a much better chance of success of just bombing Iran around the Strait of Hormuz to open it. That seems to me like it would have a much greater chance of success outright than this whole goofy gymnastics plan we've come up with so far.
Nah, I wouldn't say so. I really, being straight up honest, I wouldn't say so. It's not nothing is done with the Strait of Hormuz is going to be easy whatsoever, and ground troops are going to involve pretty high casualties. The reason why they're doing this, by the way, this whole blockade thing, is because they know, like we've also been saying here on this channel, they know it's going to involve casualties and probably in a decent number of casualties because of the drone threat and basically the fish in a barrel effect of Marines getting put on a very compact island, and the Iranians still have tons of attack drones left, so they're going to be lobbing those things like no tomorrow at our Marines on that island, and the casualties are going to be high, and it's going to be a tragedy to say the least. So they know that, even though they're denying it and they're pretending like it's not the case. That's why they're doing this like weird strategy with the blockade, because they're trying to find something that they can do outside of causing a disaster with this whole thing. So I mean, there's no, the word easy and the Strait of Hormuz simply don't go together. It's just not the case. Nothing is going to be easy involving this situation at all.
So let me ask you something. Do you think that those destroyers made it to the other end of the Strait of Hormuz and back?
I'm on the fence about it. I was emailed by a viewer today who presented some evidence on that. It looks like they might have crossed through there, and also it appears to be the U.S. officials confirmed today that Iran launched a drone at one of those destroyers in the strait. So it's possible they went through, but the only thing that's making me question that is the Navy has not put out any visual evidence of those ships going through. And right now the Navy is filming propaganda like nonstop, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they can film whatever they want. But it seems like if they did a freedom of navigation mission through the Strait of Hormuz, it seems like they would have filmed that and they would have posted it like they do pretty much everything else. But so far, I've not seen any videos of that transit yet, which is a little bit questionable to me.
So let's say though, for the sake of the argument here, for the viewers who say that that did happen, let's say that they did go all the way through the strait and back. So going off of that, we would have to know that at the worst case scenario of the U.S. Navy's threat assessments, before they did that, they probably came to the conclusion, because they wouldn't have done this otherwise, that if for some reason the Iranians really did fire on those ships while they were going through and back through the strait, the ships would be able to handle the attack that would be coming to follow. Wouldn't that be a logical assumption to take?
And you're saying, say that one more time. I didn't quite get it.
So the Navy, before they even conducted this operation, with the intelligence that we have available, must have deduced that it was safe enough to pass through this strait, because if this somehow incensed the Iranians enough that they would attack, these destroyers would have the firepower and the defensive abilities to be able to thwart that attack and see that the vessels were able to retreat intact without taking damage. That would be a fairly reasonable assumption to make. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent those ships in to what could have been a possible fiery grave at the bottom of the Strait of Hormuz, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
So
are you saying there's no mines in the strait?
No. Here's what no. I'm getting around to my point. I'm just trying to get us through like the logical conclusions here and build it up to the end. So if the Navy came up with that plan and said that that was safe enough to do, then we can reasonably assume that the amount of firepower that the Iranians have around the Strait of Hormuz is so small, according to our intelligence, that a singular destroyer or two destroyers can deal with it in an entire circumnavigation of the strait. Right.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, because remember, when these destroyers allegedly passed through, it was during the ceasefire, and it was also during the midst of peace talks. So it was a different circumstance. Once the shooting starts again and the war kicks off full scale again, I suspect that the Iranians are going to be bringing out their full firepower, which is currently hiding in underground bunkers and underground facilities right off the coast. They'll probably bring it back out because, according to all the intel assessments I've seen and heard about so far, the Iranians still possess quite a large capacity of missile launching abilities, and also they possess thousands of attack drones still. So they have the ability to attack, but it looks like they did a minimal attack, probably because they were trying to see where the peace talks were going when those ships passed through.
But the thing is, though, is what I'm saying, Matthew. It's like the Navy doesn't plan off of, well, that can't happen. They're going to say, in the worst case scenario, what if we come under attack? And apparently they came to some conclusion that if they came under attack, they'd be able to handle it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have approved those ships to go through at all, because they would have said, like all the other times, that it was too dangerous to go through. So the fact that they went through, if we're taking that at face value, they went all the way through the strait and then back, shows us that whatever kind of firepower outside of the mines that are in the water right now that the Iranians have on the shore is weak enough that a destroyer or two destroyers and their combined firepower can deal with whatever threat would come from shore. And if that is the case, that means that there's not a lot of resistance around the Strait of Hormuz, and in a extended air campaign of 3 weeks around that area, and of any other launchers that may be further inland, not within the direct littoral area of the coast, could probably deal with most of the firepower the Iranians have on shore to weaken their abilities to enough that destroyers could easily make continual passages in and out of the strait, and also conduct convoy escorts as well, protecting the tankers that they're bringing along with them, either into the Gulf or out of the Gulf.
No, I would disagree. I think the Iranians have their stuff hidden in fortified bunkers on the coast, I would say. So that's the reason why they haven't been able to hit them so far. Because we've seen before the ceasefire talks, kicked off and the little ceasefire went into effect. We saw the Iranians firing missiles from the coastline at commercial vessels. They were still doing that before the ceasefire talks came around. So they still have the missiles there. And we didn't see a missile get fired at one of the destroyers that passed through. We just saw allegedly a drone get fired at it. So they could have fired worse, but they didn't.
But I mean, but the thing is, though, is that we never tested this well enough to know. Like you're saying, it's impossible. I'm saying it is, and we haven't even ever sent a destroyer up towards the Iranians to goad them into firing to figure out what kind of firepower they really would be able to throw at something if it tried to make it through. Like I think at this point, folks, my strategy would be, as the president of the United States, if I was the president, I would say we are sending destroyers through. And that's going to be that. And that would be a ruse. We're not going to send them through. They're just going to go far enough to goad them into shooting at them. And then once they start firing, then we're going to get a really good idea of what kind of coastal batteries they have available of all types to be able to try and target these ships. And once we start to get that intelligence out of how many operational batteries they actually have, we might find out that they have so little that we could deal with that with an air campaign and see that the area is open. And if we can't deal with it with an air campaign, and they are bunkers that are under the ground, well, that doesn't stop them from a special forces raid. And considering how close they are to the shore, I would assume, because, they can't be that far inland, because then the response time would be a lot slower. And dealing with the Strait of Hormuz, given it's such a small area, response times would be prioritized for the missiles launched to impact. So the distance launched would be fairly small, maybe 100 miles inland. We could just fly special forces teams in one at a time to deal with these batteries if they can't be hit by conventional ordnance, and see if they can somehow penetrate the facilities under heavy air cover and then destroy them on the ground. And we could find some way to clear this thing out. It might take time. It might take weeks. But I think that's a way easier sort of an approach, to be entirely frank with everyone, than it is to try and figure out how to play pity pack hacky sack with everyone around the world and figure out if we can put enough pressure on Iran to where they'd open it. Because what if there is no such thing as putting enough pressure on Iran to where they relent and open it? What if they're under significant pressure and they never open it? And I feel like that's probably the case, is that no matter the pressure internationally, they probably will never reopen it, because they really don't rely on the external world a whole lot in reality, at least in their current situation, to keep themselves afloat, considering that they're not dealing with a direct ground threat at the moment that would be large enough to threaten the country actually being taken over. So I would say that's probably would be my approach, because that seems like the one that would have the best chance of success, or at least give us a really good idea in real physical terms whether it's possible or not.
On this one, I'm going to say time's going to tell on this one right here. I'm just going to take the cop out answer here and say that the time is going to tell how this turns out. I mean, I would rather just say that than give my negative answer that I'm really thinking. To be honest, I'd rather just say that because the situation is not positive. But at the same time, though, I am so tired of having to go over these negative outcomes, which it's reality, but it's also negative at the same time. It's just. Oh boy, I tell you, it's just interesting stuff.
Also, I also saw someone say the missiles and drones are not all on the coast; they're deep inside Iran. That for some of them that's true, but here's the thing that people aren't understanding is that you can't like they can't fire a missile all the way from Mashhad, say for example, because that missile, like for example, for a missile to be used against a ship, it has to be a specialized design of missile, which is an anti-ship missile. You can't just use any type of missile. Like the Iranians could have 1,000 Karam-Shahar 4s. They might only have about 100 anti-ship missiles in their entire arsenal. We don't know that figure publicly because the Department of Defense has never broken that down publicly for us to know. And I would assume out of all the missiles that they make, considering that anti-ship missiles have to track and hit a moving target at sea, they're going to be a lot more mechanically complex and expensive than a normal ballistic missile that they produce en masse, and for that reason they're going to have a lot less of them just due to cost concerns. So with that in mind, they're going to have a smaller number of them that we have to deal with, and on top of that, there's the important fact of the response time has to be short. They can't fire an anti-ship missile all the way from a shot. Anti-ship missiles don't have that kind of range. So at best, they're going to be 100 miles inland from the area. That also means that one, they're going to have a limited number. They're eventually going to run out of them. And then secondly, they're also at some point close enough to the strait that direct air actions within that general vicinity of southeastern Iran could deal with most of the threats. And so I hope that kind of clears up what I'm saying here. And also on top of that, for drones that are flying at like 100 miles an hour or 120 miles an hour, they have to be fired from the coast, because if they're not fired from the coast, it's going to take them so long to get down there from a place like northern Iran, say, for example. It would take them about 8 hours to get down there, and by 8 hours later, once the ship has entered the Strait of Hormuz, it has departed the Strait of Hormuz, and it's now in the Persian Gulf, somewhere within its eastern end, or eastern periphery somewhere, meaning that drone would then have to try and find them, and at that point, it might be out of visual or detectable range of Iranian coastal defenses, and then they don't even really know where those ships went, or at least the warships, as long as their transponders are off. So those are all of the additional factors there that doesn't make it to where Iran can literally conduct an attack from everywhere. They can conduct an attack from, say, 100 miles inland against a ship, but any farther than that would generally be out of their practical abilities. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have another question here. This one's from Butchie777, all the way from the UK, the Britain, they say, the Britain. And Butchie said, will the Middle East countries eventually run out of storage for all this crude that they're pumping? And it's very difficult and costly to switch the pumps off. And I don't think they will actually. I don't say what?
They actually did a couple of weeks in, like 2 weeks in, they had to start shutting down pumps.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe so, but I think Iran's going to go back to hitting their oil storage for the most part. So we'll probably see whatever they got, in storage will probably get burned up because they'll probably get blasted by Iran. Would be my guess if the war starts up in that capacity again. That's what I would assume. But also, I think you're right. But Enforcer, what say you?
They actually did run out of capacity about 2 weeks in because we had already started to hear reports from some of the larger oil companies inside of these countries that they were shutting down pumps because the oil storage facilities were already at max capacity. Because in the Middle East, it's almost a precision schedule of how they run their oil industry, in that the oil that's extracted today is probably going to be shipped out of the country within the next few days at a port, so they don't really need a whole bunch of massive storage capacities or capabilities because it's not going to be around for long. They literally pump it right out of the ground and then it's unloaded from their hands maybe within that day or just days later. So as soon as that sort of a supply line is disrupted that usually operates almost off of a precision schedule, their storage capacity is incredibly small, so it fills up almost instantaneously in any realistic period of time, which would be about a week or two, and then they have to start shutting down pumps because there's literally nowhere to store the oil that those pumps are producing. So from what we know, a lot of oil fields in a lot of these countries have already started to become inactive because they've already reached maximum capacity several weeks ago. So I hope that does address that the best that I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Jake. He said, "So what's the point of oil independence if we sell our oil to the world, driving our costs to the roof in times of crisis?" I don't know. I don't know. It's like don't expect me to answer for this shit. Like I don't have any answers for what's going on. Like I don't have any answers for it. You know, I'm 25 years old. I should be looking up to these people. I should be saying these are wise people. They've become wise in their old age. I should be looking up to these people and saying I want to grow up to be like that. I want to grow up to be orange and I want to grow up to be wise, but I'm not able to say that. It seems like the tables have flipped. I'm not the smartest person in the world, and of course I'm 25, and people are going to probably say this in the chat. They say, "Oh, you don't have as much life experience as somebody at 60 or 70 years old," and that is true. I will admit that, but I'm not seeing it on display. I mean, where is it? But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd tell you the reason why it's actually pretty long and drawn out. Honestly, any answers with dealing with the oil industry are pretty long and drawn out because you have to explain the whole global system. But to shorten it down, the reason why we do that is because in some cases the foreign purchase orders come in before anyone else's, because as long as they're willing to pay the set rate per price of oil when that contract is written, it's sold to whoever wants to buy it, and that's how the global system works, because it's not like it doesn't work off of a national system. That's basically the easiest way to explain it. So if someone in Britain fills out a purchase order for 2 million barrels of oil out of Texas before an American company does, they get those 2 million barrels of oil, not an American company. And that's generally how the whole system works on an international scale, and that's how it works for everyone. And also it has to do with a whole bunch of other things like shipping and handling costs and all that sort of stuff, which they figure out really quickly. And they might figure out, oh, look, it's cheaper to get it from Saudi Arabia than it is America. Go fill out a purchase order there. And then the next week, it might be that it's cheaper to get it from America than there. And then they fill out a purchase order in the United States. Because it's a commodities market. So they're looking for the cheapest way to get the largest bulk of the commodity that they can. So generally, that's the best way I can explain it. But the reality of it is that it's a lot more complicated than that, and I'll be entirely honest, it would take like 30 minutes to explain it all, and I would very much explain it in a very disjointed way, because it's a lot to talk about and a bunch of different things that come together. And I'll be honest with y'all, I don't explain that kind of stuff wildly well, especially when it's like 30 minutes of different points coming together to make one answer. So it would come out pretty disjointed. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with a shorter answer. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And we're going to end the stream with a lighthearted question here, because I need some relief from all this negative news coming out right here. We got some good news today. We did see a big win for Europe and Ukraine today with the Hungary situations. That was good news. But let's get into our last question here, which goes to Shelby Lynn Taylor, who said, "I'm a new viewer to your show. Could you please do an introduction of yourselves? How did this channel get started? I really appreciate how you both present the news, and thanks." And thank you for the kind words, by the way. I feel like this is one of those things in college where they're like, we're going to have an icebreaker, and you're going to stand up and introduce yourself. Say something about like your hometown, where you're from, and everybody gets up and always like, I'm from so-and-so. Nobody really knows what they're saying. But anyways, though, I'm an enforcer, Matt. I'm the older brother. We're both brothers, by the way. I'm 25, and I'm not a 40-year-old CIA agent, as many people try to go around saying. I'm also not part of the Mossad either, but I'm 25. My background is in political science. That's what I studied. Got a bachelor's in that. Then I went to a year of law school and left that to work full time on the channel, because I would much rather do this than go and stay in law school. So that is largely my background. I've always had a fascination with politics. Also, a side hobby of mine as well is psychology. And then obviously when I was in law school, I studied that as well. In fact, the other night we were talking about the FISA courts, and out of the blue, someone emailed me who's actually involved with that, and was like, "Hey, you know an awful lot about that. That's kind of fascinating." And they were wanting to know where I knew about all that stuff. So I was like, "Hey," I was like, "Fascinating." I just studied out of curiosity, really. But that's me. But Enforcer, who are you? Who are you?
Who am I? I'm basically the Colonel Sanders of the show. Like I'm the founder of this thing. I started this way back in, hell, it was like September of 2021, and back then it wasn't known at all. The channel would only get known to some extent in February and March of 2022, and that's really when the channel kind of took off. But way back then, I was in college and I was getting a bachelor's in history, which was a blast for me because I loved history. And the plan was, or more so, the plan that I was told I was going to have to go with is that I was going to have to go to law school. So that was the situation back then when the channel started. But the thing was, folks, is that what had happened before that to create the channel, because it was completely coincidental, is that the second wave of COVID came around, and because I was living with my parents, they were scared of getting it, so they told me that I had to quit my job and just stay home. And I really liked working. Like to be honest, folks, I really like to work, and I like to think that I'm doing something and going somewhere somehow. Before this, by the way, folks, my last job that I had ever before I did this was that I was working at a restaurant in Birmingham as a server. So you might have been served by me if you were in Birmingham at some point. You went to a place called The Club, because I used to work there for a couple of weeks. But outside of that, the second wave came around. I had to quit my job, but I wanted something to do. And so I was like, I want to do something that I always wanted to do, which is cover news and talk about history and stuff. So I created this channel, and it was actually called The Think Tank for the first week or so, or couple of weeks, that the thing existed. And I made two videos. I made one on the fall of Afghanistan, because that had happened at the very time that I made my channel. And then I made a second one on the protests and the riots in Hong Kong and the whole history of Hong Kong and why all that was going on. And both of those did badly. But actually, I had really high standards. Both of them got 500 views. And for a channel that only had 7 subscribers, those would actually be considered breakout videos for a channel of that size. I didn't know that back then, so I thought they had completely failed. I was expecting like tens of thousands of views or hundreds of thousands of views, and I only got like 500 on each. So I gave up on that, and then I went to gaming, and I made it into a gaming channel. And that's where the channel got the name The Enforcer, because The Enforcer is actually my gaming handle on a lot of games that I play. So that's where it got the name from. It's literally just my gamer name. So anyways, did some gaming videos. I didn't really like gaming that much. I thought it was kind of lame, and having to like force myself to sound really excited about games I played all the time was kind of a little bit lame. And then the war in Ukraine started, and I went all in on that, covering it every single day, all that sort of stuff. And then the channel finally blew up on the 4th day, and about a month in, Matthew joined in on the channel, and then since then, we've been running it. In the midst of all that, we both ended up graduating from UAB and getting our bachelor's for Matthew in political science and mine in history, and then we both went to law school at the exact same time in the exact same semester, and then we both dropped out within days of each other to run this thing full time, and now years later, we're finally in Salt Lake City with a channel of this size, and have been doing it for about 4 years. So that's basically, as Matthew just put in the chat, the whole history at its inception and who we are and where the thing came from.
The whole textbook.
The whole thing, the whole history. I mean, they asked who we are and where we came from, and that's who we are and where we came from. That's basically the whole story.
But who are you?
Who am I?
Who are any of us?
I'm nobody, really. like I'm nobody, really.
Man, you sound like Charles Manson out here talking about, I'm nobody. I'm just a boxcar and a straight razor if you get too close.
Actually, I was more going for Rodney Dangerfield. Oh man, I'm nobody. Like I was kind of
going for the serial killer vibe for a minute. I was trying to say, what in the world?
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. And I really did get no respect. There was people back then all over the place. Matthew can tell you, he was around to see it, that would tell me that, YouTube was what bums did, and it was a loser sort of a thing, and it wouldn't never go anywhere. It's a stupid pipe dream, because I'm a stupid pipe dream kind of a person. And then it turned up to be the way it is now, which I'm pretty happy about. I'm pretty proud of it. Personally myself, I know Matthew definitely is as well, but speaking for myself, for my own personal feelings on it, I'm exceptionally proud of it, because I never thought that this would make it anywhere. And basically everybody around me back then told me that it was going to go nowhere, and here we are 4 years later, and yesterday we were the number 9 largest live stream on YouTube in the States. So, pretty far away to go from there. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Great final question right there. And nice to meet you too as well, my lady Lily. And it is a really interesting story to say the least. But with that, that is the end of tonight's stream on that little story. I thank you all so much once again for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running tonight. And not only that, supporting the fundraiser massively. We have raised over $3,000 tonight for the USO, which is an absolutely incredible and amazing thing. And I love to know that so many people continue to watch this channel as their primary source of news and come here each and every single day to be able to get the news from us, and generally us alone these days for some people, because a lot of y'all take this as a primary source of news. And I got to thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck. Take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Haram Slava. Long live the Late Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all definitely on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern once again for another night of War News streams and all the news on that stream, of course, at 10 p.m. Eastern. And tomorrow, we will not be streaming. If you're new, Mondays are our day off. Unless there is something that crazy happens or something like that. Like if tomorrow, all of a sudden, we're like seizing a Chinese vessel, that might be worth going live on an emergency stream. But we'll have to see, though. But for now, though, we don't plan on it, but we will see. But in the meantime, though, if there is enough news tomorrow, midday, I will be putting out a short war video. As you might have noticed, over the past 8 or 10 days or so, we have been going non-stop trying to get those back out again. So thankfully, we've had news to cover to put those back out. So hopefully that keeps going, and hopefully the news comes out earlier so we can put out those short war videos. It looks like a lot of people are watching those, so we will keep delivering. But in the meantime, though, thank you all once again for another successful fundraiser. Over $3,300 raised, and also over 190,000 people that joined us by the end of the stream tonight. So we appreciate you all once again, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.